The meeting is called to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Where's the flag? To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
As always, the meeting is being covered by Jam TV. The recording will be ready in a few days. That's also a Zoom connection that people can use who would like to participate in that way, especially during public comment. And the instructions for the Zoom link are on the district website in the information for tonight's board meeting. Are there any additions or deletions from the agenda, Joanne?
None.
Joanne will be leaving at some point during our proceedings tonight, but I don't think we need to change any of the order of anything on the agenda. We now have, the floor is now open for public comment, either in person or via Zoom, subject to our policy BEDH. And let's start in the room. Is there anyone here present who would like to talk to the board about any matter concerning the school district? Roger?
Hi, I'm Roger Lohr. Have been the minutes taker for the Lebanon School District. I looked it up. It was May 2015. I wanted to make it official that this was going to be my last meeting taking minutes for the Lebanon School District and express my appreciation, not only to this board on behalf of all the boards I've worked for in the Upper Valley, which is many, for 20 some odd years, but also to the superintendent and the business administrator for hiring me and paying me all the time so well. Thank you. It's a tough job, I think, for all you guys, and on behalf of all the boards, I thank you, have gratitude for everybody who serves a community like this. So I wanted to just say thank you and have a happy holiday, and I hope I see you on the trails and on the snow.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Roger.
Roger, for all your service over the years. And I was going to mention this later on in the meeting, but there's a notice on the district website. We're looking to hire a new minutes taker, and if anyone knows of anyone who would be appropriate for that position, please let Joanne know. Anyone else in the room who would like to address the board?
And I do not see any hands raised.
No one has a hand raised on Zoom. The public comment period is closed. We'll now move on to the consent agenda.
Can I just ask a question?
Of course.
If Joanne leaves, do we need her here to discuss 10H?
Well,
No,
we'll
other
make-
people can discuss it. It'll
Okay.
be fine. Thank you. People can just let me know. And I can talk briefly about it, my superintendent's update.
Yeah, let's move that up to the super report and get that out of the way. Thanks. Before we move on to the consent agenda, I skipped over correspondence, which is in the correspondence folder. Lil, could you give us a quick rundown on what's in there?
Yes, we had a couple of pieces of correspondence. One asking for us to be cognizant of the property tax increases in our budget considerations. One thanking us for voting to continue the SRO, and then three from parents who were interested in keeping or in having an additional fourth grade teacher at Mount Leb.
Thank you. And as always, the full text of those meetings is available on the website for anyone who would like to see them. Now, consent agenda. May I please have a motion to approve the public minutes from the November 9th board meeting?
I'll make a motion to approve the public board minutes from the November 9th, 2022 meeting.
I second it.
Motion by MJ, seconded by Stephen. Are there any corrections? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes. Opposed? Abstentions?
I guess I should abstain. I think that was.
1 abstention. Now we need a motion to,
Yeah, Lisa, were you?
sorry?
Lisa is listed as not attending.
On November 9th.
Were you there? You should abstain.
Yeah. So it's really 7 with 2 abstentions.
Right, okay. So the actual tally is 702. Thanks. Motion, please, to approve the special board meeting minutes from November 19th. That's the Saturday meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the special board meeting minutes from November 19th, 2022.
Moved by MJ, second by Stephen. Are there any corrections or questions about those minutes?
I actually left at 10, not 11. But then I was on Zoom before the break, so.
I just happened to notice that in section 10, just for correction, in the next board meeting is December 14th at 6:30 PM at AM.
6:30 a.m.
Thank you, Tim.
I think along those lines, the finance and facility meeting too was a day off.
Where is that?
I think it was listed as the 14th,
Okay.
which is tomorrow. It's tomorrow or the 15th.
Is that in the minutes?
Oh, no, maybe that was something.
It's in the
Okay, anything else on the, on that meeting? All right, all in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes, opposed, abstained, 1. So 8, 0, 1. Nominations and resignations, retirements. I believe there's one. Joanne?
Correct. There's one nomination in the packet for a third grade teacher.
Okay, I think we need a motion to approve this nomination.
Make a motion to approve the nomination resignation sheet dated December 14th, 2022.
Motion by MJ, second by Stephen. Any questions for the superintendent? Yes, MJ.
So is this the teacher that was acting as the long-term sub, or is this a completely new candidate that was hired to replace the previous resignation?
I know talking with Jack that Mrs. Bentley had been subbing for a bit of time and she will be transitioning to the actual teaching position, but I don't know how long she has been subbing for in that class. Do you have any idea, Jack?
8 days.
8 days. I also believe this is the class where Mrs. Peavy
Yes.
helped out, so I would like to acknowledge Mrs. Peavy's help and assistance for that period of time, and we're very grateful for that.
Any other questions?
Are
Wendy?
these salaries prorated salaries? Are they?
Do you want to? Yeah.
So, yeah, the one that's leaving, I think that was going to be the salary for the whole year. And I think the one coming in is, I'd have to check on whether that's prorated or not. It, goes by the contract, and I didn't check with Heidi before she filled this out, so I'm not sure what she did. I apologize. I can find out though.
All right, all in favor of the nominations? 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 0. Thank you. Moving on to our student report.
Hello. Okay. So at Lebanon High School, we have recently had our wet paint players production of the Addams Family, which went really well. First 2 days. Third day was a bit rocky, but it still went on really well. Student consensus is that everyone really loved it. It was really funny, and it was really musical. Student council has made progress on revising and modernizing the dress code, and we now have a draft that is ready to be reviewed and edited by admin at our school. Student council is also working on our Winterfest activities. We have our maps and our activities done. We're just waiting on a couple of last things, which should be good when we're on schedule for that. And we have a new date for our Wellness Week, which is the week after midterms, which is really nice because that means last year it was like near the end of the school year, so everyone was like scrambling for like AP tests, finals, and a bunch of other stuff that goes on at the end of the year. So now it's in the middle of the year after midterms, so everyone can just like de-stress, which is really nice.
Questions? Lisa?
So we've just been going over the student handbooks, and are you imagining that this new dress code would go into the student handbook for next year?
Yes, we're thinking that like, since we had a dress code beforehand, but it was mainly like enforced only if like it violated like human decency and like hate speech and stuff like that. Now we're just adding it to be put in the student handbook, so people can just like commonly like look into it and like see what they should wear and what they shouldn't and stuff like that, without having to like go by like social norms that were like not put in the student handbook before because our old dress code was not up to date.
Anything else? Is there an update on the dodgeball tournament?
Oh yes. The team I want to win is, I think, going to win, so that's good. Yeah, everyone's really had fun during the dodgeball tournament. It's really like a good team building, and like we made it so that like you have to have different genders and you have to have kids from across the grades, which has made like a really good like inter-grade connecting activity, which is really nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now move on to the superintendent update, and Joanne, at the end of that, let's talk about the calendar.
Sure.
The calendar issue, 10H.
Sure. My full update is in the packet. Based on time, I'm going to talk a bit about the renovation projects, the response to the active shooter hoax, and then answer any questions that people might have. We met just Tuesday over at Mount Lep. We had a great meeting. That renovation is moving forward in a timely manner. Meetings continue to meet every 2 weeks. The roof on the new addition is weather tight. Mechanical, electrical, plumbing, rough-ins are ongoing in the new addition. 2 new 1,000-gallon propane tanks have been installed by Irving Propane to serve the school. Exterior spray foam installation and installation is scheduled this week. Exterior brick wall construction is scheduled to follow spray foam. Katie and her administrative team and the entire staff have done a great job of keeping the focus on education, even though there's a big renovation happening, and having students be part of that is a great thing. Over at Hanover Street and High School, the project, the construction documents, drawings, and specifications used for bidding are well underway. They'll be completed the first week of January. Ekman has been providing feedback on budget and construction logistics as the design has progressed. and we as architects believe the project continues to be within the budget. The project will be put out to bid in January, which is the key time to get school projects out, with construction scheduled to begin by the end of the school year. So we should have the bids back probably mid-February or so for that project. The other items are just kind of key things that I've been working on. It's not a list of everything that I've been doing, but I did want to provide an overview in regard to the steps we took in our emergency response. So first, I would like to thank Mrs. McIntyre, LMS Principal, Mrs. Estes Director of School and Community Relations, and Lebanon Police Chief Bill Roberts, as well as the Police Department for their communication and collaboration throughout the incident and adherence to our emergency protocols. On Thursday morning, the Lebanon Police received an anonymous phone call which could not be traced. The caller stated that they were a teacher at LMS and there was an active shooter. The officer who took the call followed protocols asking for specific information. At that point, they had already been aware that there was a statewide hoax happening through their own agencies. The person's responses were vague. For example, my understanding is that the caller could not identify the name of the LMS principal. Police officers were immediately dispatched to LMS. The police department called the LMS main office and asked if anything out of the ordinary was happening, and Mrs. McIntyre was informed that officers were on their way. The officers arrived and talked with Mrs. McIntyre, and at that time they informed her that there was a statewide hoax, but responded as if it were an emergency. Per our emergency protocols, once police or fire department officials arrive, they become the commanders, and we assist however needed. The officers did a walkthrough of LMS and determined there was no safety risk. For our protocols, Mrs. McIntyre called me, and I contacted Mrs. Estes and updated her on the situation. I asked her to contact Mrs. McGuire to make sure the information sent from the SA office aligned with what was sent to LMS community members. The first message sent by Mrs. McGuire via school messenger was delivered at approximately 11:06, followed by Diane's email, which was delivered at approximately 11:32. And then Chief Roberts contacted me, and we reviewed the steps taken. And a Lebanon Police Communications press release was delivered at approximately 11:59. At approximately 10:47, some community members may have received information about a statewide hoax sent by New Hampshire Homeland Security. At that time, we were working with the Lebanon Police Department responding to the LMS incident. During this time, I was facilitating an SAU and school administrator meeting, and everyone was kept informed about the situation. The safety of our students and staff members is a priority. We continue to practice and follow our emergency protocols. In the event of an incident, please know our focus will be on responding to that event. We'll work collaboratively with local police and fire departments and follow their lead. As soon as we have definite, accurate information, it will be sent to families and community members. Please do not rely on social media or school-associated organizations for information. We are grateful for the support from organized organizations, but their role is not to be the conduit of school district information. I encourage you to reach out to me, the school principal, or Diane if questions come up, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. We sent out the information to thousands of folks, so we had a couple of folks write back to thank us for the communication. And other than that, we didn't receive any responses to the information that we pushed out. So I hope that helps provide a bit of an overview of the incident and our response. Any questions about that or the superintendent's update? Wendy?
I think one, maybe.
Wendy, can you use your mic? We can't. Sorry.
I think as a parent, I think the one thing that might have been helpful in the communication is to have some sense of what our students might have witnessed, or because I had no idea until Sawyer got home whether he had any idea that it had happened. He walked through the door and he's like, "What?" You know, I asked, he had no idea. And so just to have parents have some sense of what they're going to need to
Yeah, that makes sense.
to work with when the kids get home.
MJ?
So I completely agree with that sentiment, because I too said, oh, you had an exciting day at school. My kid said, what are you talking about? And so it was a completely different conversation than I was prepared for. But the other thing is, I'm wondering the choice to send it out via email, not the phone alert system like we do with snow days, just because I know I have trouble getting email during the day, so I was contacted by a Hanover parent that had heard before me, and then I couldn't download the email where I was that had the information. So I'm just kind of wondering where the decision is to send it email versus the phone.
So since before I've been here and as part of our EOP, if we expect parents to do something like not have their children come to school, if it's an action, we do the phone. If it's something where we're pushing information out, we do school messenger. So the reason for that is prior to my coming in, they were using phone messages all the time, and people weren't listening to the phone messages anymore. So it's kind of what you're saying makes a lot of sense, because we had that exact conversation, and we said we need to continue with our protocols, otherwise people will get confused. And we appreciate it when people, if they can, read the email or listen to the full phone message. Sometimes people just say, I got an alert, and they don't even read it. And then the SAU office or the main office gets really overwhelmed by parents calling in. So, that's the reason behind the steps that we took.
Dick, I have one question.
Yep, go ahead, Lil.
So I do want to reiterate what MJ and Wendy said. I think the same would have been helpful to know if the children had known anything, and if they did, if there had been a drill, if there was not a drill. I mean, sort of to say that there was something happened and we didn't really know how to follow up with the kids. And so I think that would have been helpful. Any information about what the children were involved in or not involved in, I think would have made it easier for parents to, because either you're going to be able to process with them afterwards, or you're going to say, hey, did you hear about the the thing that happened at your school that didn't happen? Either way is going to be sort of alarming if you're not prepared with the right information. So I just think, more is more, for especially in something like this.
Anything else for Joanne? Okay, Joanne, would you like to talk about the calendar adjustment?
Thank you, I would have gotten that already. Last year, the board had a conversation about holding school on January 2nd. I believe that's the date of the Monday. And the board decided to keep that date because we were introducing 1.5 days of conference days for middle school, and there was a conversation about students being in school. So the board approved that calendar with that date in as a school day. And then we recently had parents and staff members say, do you know that that's a federal holiday, that Monday? So are we having school that Monday or not? Hartford is not having school on that Monday, and there are some other things that will be closed because it's a federal holiday. So I wanted to bring this back to the board and have a vote specifically on that day so that we can respond to questions that might come our way. We do have 5 or 6 emergency closing days this school year. We haven't used one yet. So, I mean, there might be some flexibility if you decide not to have staff and students come to school that day. I never know if staff are going to take that day and ask for a sub. I just don't know. But I wanted to bring it back so that if community members mention it to you, you can at least acknowledge that we knew and that we had a conversation about it, and this is the decision that was made by the board. So I'd be looking for a motion, and then the board deciding if you want to keep that day, although it's a federal holiday, and just hope we go through the rest of the year not using the emergency days. If we do and we go over, I just remind you that we go to remote for the additional days at the end of the year if we need to, if we go over that number.
What's your preference, Joanne?
I think that it would probably be a good idea to not have school that day, because I think we're going to have staff that don't come or parents who are going to say, I'm off of work that day, so I'm going to keep my child home that day. But I really value instruction, and I think every day is really important for teachers and for children. And there are parents who plan to be at work that day based on the calendar that we pushed out multiple times. So I think it just depends on the lens of the family situation that you're looking at.
What does our contract for teachers?
Tim just left. Correct timing. I actually think the contract is in days, and we calculate by hours, and it's always something that I ask him to.
And there's no mention of how we handle federal holidays?
I know the LSS contract has a list of holidays, but I don't recall if January 2nd was on there, and I know January 1st is.
Well, it would be January 2nd if January 1st
Wasn't a
was on a
weekend.
weekend. So then,
Right.
if January 1st is on it, then that's one of the ones that is counted.
Right.
Yeah, it's just that it was on the weekend that.
The other contracts, I think, do not enumerate those days. They just have a
And
start.
the calendar was given to LEA last year before it got approved, but I don't know how many people saw it. And it was a switch over from years of one president to another, so it might not have been on their radar. For next year, I've already asked Hartford to see theirs. We've already drafted ours to triple check. And then once I have Hartford's and make sure that we're matching it, I'll send it to the LEA as well, so we can flag it.
Tim, there was a question of any of our collective bargaining agreements specify which days we have off. And I know LSS has a list of holidays.
Yes, LSS is the main one, and what we usually do and what we would have done either way is it's basically a day you get paid for. So if we were figuring out if we were in school on the 2nd, then we would pay them for one more day during the break than they normally would. So.
Can you say that again, louder?
So the way the calendar is now, I apologize for missing the discussion. So they get the day, I have to look it up. Like, say you have New Year's Day and New Year's Day you off. It's a Sunday. So what day do you give? If Monday is not a school day, we pay for Monday. If Monday is a school day, we would just pay them both Thursday and Friday of the prior week. If that makes sense. When they fall on a weekend, you just kind of take this. You're paying for 2 days around.
Would someone care to make a motion to not have January 2nd as a school day?
I'll make the motion, then we can talk about it. I move that we do not have January 2nd as a school day.
Moved by Lil, second by Stephen. Is there any discussion? Anyone want to weigh in on the pros? Go ahead, Kristen.
Just quickly, it actually caught my eye recently too, because I saw that the 2nd was the official federal holiday. I was actually a little surprised, and I didn't remember. Obviously, I probably voted for the calendar last year, but I think it would be a good idea to have the 2nd as a holiday. We already have, not such a long Christmas break this year, so I think it would be nice and would be good for the family, especially people who travel over that weekend, that Monday they could have off.
Any other comments? Objections? All right, let's take a vote. All in favor of the motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All opposed? 1. Motion passes.
Dick, can I just ask one quick question?
Of course.
Do we have any staff like hourly staff that may be counting on that day? Like, how are they affected by?
I think you just said they would get paid because it's a holiday, so they're.
Is that true of?
Paid the whole rate in the LSS.
Tim, question is there hourly staff who are counting on working that day? Would there be a scenario like that?
Do they still get paid per their contract?
Well, you're referencing the SAU. One thing that we noticed was that when the SAU schedule came out this summer, I don't really look at it, and they had taken that day off as their federal day off. So this kind of now aligns with the SAU office. If it didn't, we would have flipped and given them the Friday prior off instead of the Monday.
Yeah, I'm not thinking of someone who's out. I guess school bus drivers don't get paid if they don't work. But as far as the staff in the buildings, everyone's going to get paid. Either have with your you pay a certain number of days you work or and paid holidays. So I don't see any roadblock to it because the day's off. So it's a bigger issue if you make them work on a day they're off and we can pay them. But that was not. I'm sorry.
So it ended up being 1 to not school that
Okay,
day.
good.
Moving on, Joanne, you're all done, nothing else from the superintendent? Okay. Tim, do you have a separate BA update, or are you planning on just launching into
Well-
our continuation of the budget?
I included an expenditure report, but I apologize. I just noticed I had two in front of me and I sent the wrong one to Lori. So I have, the one in there is November 21. It's old. So I have November 22 I'm going to pass out, but I really wasn't going to speak much about it because it's so early in the year from my perspective. So if it's okay with you, I'll hand it out to you guys and you can ask me questions anytime you want, but you're not going to have time to have looked at this. I just apologize. That's the wrong one.
So it's not just titled wrong, it's the wrong year.
I'm like, I don't understand why those numbers aren't matching what I'm looking
Okay,
at.
all right. Well, as long as you're giving it out, Tim, we may as well look at it and ask any questions we might have.
If you want to have the numbers, because you've been on the board a while or whatever, the numbers look pretty similar early in the year especially. So if you have any questions, I'll certainly either write them down or answer them if I know them. After we get set with the budget, then sort of really studying these numbers becomes, my top priority. So I try to start digging into what questions might arise.
So, Tim, the transportation line items continue to lag. Is that just because of where we are in the year, or, I'm looking at everything from 27-21 down to 27-25.
Right. So the regular ed and the special ed, you'll see they're pretty high. Those we try to encumber, what is pretty general regular usage. But the lower you go on athletics and field trips, especially, though, we don't encumber that money. It really depends on trips we take and how far how far we go and how long we're there. So they do tend to not keep up with some of the other numbers.
When we're looking at this year's budget, I seem to recollect that that's one of the items that historically, for COVID-related reasons, has been underspent. And do you anticipate that we're going to be spending the full amount this year, or is something we ought to be reviewing to pare it back for 23-24?
Well, I think I mentioned, it's hard for me to remember everything I said, but I think I mentioned that I'm trying to take a good focused look at transportation and be as precise as we possibly can. But so I guess the answer is yes and no. We're trying to be. I feel like this budget is more focused on transportation than I've given it in the past, but we are handicapped by the fact that we're budgeting for trips that we're planning on taking that in the last 2 years look like they haven't been spent. But in talking with Paula and the principals, we're hoping to get back to a full load of field trips and a full load of athletic activities. So to cut those back to some level that matches the last 2 years would just handicap us for the future.
So I have a question about driver acquisition and wages, and whether or not our ability to get the bus drivers, is there a correlation that we're not spending the money because we don't have the drivers to actually do the driving? There a lot of times for maybe like cross-country skiing, they can't go because they don't have a bus, or
Right.
So I guess I'm just wondering about that.
Well, from my understanding, and talking to other, watching the news, talking to other business administrators, talking to Paula, who talks to other transportation coordinators, the dearth of drivers in the transportation field and school bus transportation is not unique to Lebanon. This budget in front of you has a wage of just over $25 an hour for our drivers. When we've not been able to run something like cross-country skiing, we need drivers. The main reason we need drivers is because we have no flexibility at the middle of the afternoon when we're trying to deliver kids home. So if you went on a trip at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it wouldn't be an issue. So it's really adding those 2 or 3 more drivers that give us the ability to go on a trip at the same time we're trying to deliver kids home. We have added 2 drivers over the summer. They don't have CDLs. So both of them can drive smaller buses. The one is working on getting her CDL, but that takes time. It's just like a regular test, only a big pre-trip thing. So we've had a little bit of success over the summer with that. I don't think our wages are out of, I mean, I said this before, our hourly wages they seem to be pretty in line. Some, Advanced Transit for a while, I don't know if they still are, but they were offering a $5,000 sign-on bonus. We've debated asking the board if we could do something like that, but we've added a couple of drivers over the summer, so I guess I feel the outlook is looking up. It's just if you're going to hire someone without a CDL, it takes time, like months, to get somebody their license.
Anything else on the November report? Okay. So we're going to move on now to our unfinished discussion and action on the 23-24 district budget. And Tim, do you want to take the lead on this and
Sure.
help us?
Pete, I got kicked off the air team again. So what I did after last Saturday, is I took the 35 million, the difference is 2.6 million.
Tim? So that 96 cents, that's the 96 cents per thousand sort of impact on the taxes. And that doesn't include the value of the collective bargaining agreements, is that right? That would be on top of that.
The bottom box,
That's the 117.
so estimated of all the negotiations, you have 96 cents for the operating budget, 16 for LSS, a penny for the Administrators Association, Administrative Assistants Association, 3 cents for lag, and the last warrant article has no cost if you put money in a cap reserve fund for money left over. So the total one of the warrant right now, as I projected, is 117, which on a $300,000 house is $350. So that's how that chart works.
And that percentage at the top, Tim, is just on the operating budget, just on the 96 cents?
Correct, correct.
And that's 5.7, 5.8%, basically.
Right, and a little editorializing, I guess, but it's 5.72% operating budget to operating budget. I just showed you what it would be without the bond, which is 2.8%, and I just thought that was helpful to show that the voters passed the bond, and it is certainly part of the number, and I'm not saying you should discount it, but I just wanted to show that requests other than that are under 3%.
Yeah, I guess that's useful, a useful way to look at it. I mean, it doesn't change anybody's tax bill. You know, I mean,
Correct.
people are still looking at a $350 increase.
What I did
Unless we
for,
cut some things out.
what I was planning on doing for tonight in this yellow box is, I just put add in there because I wanted to show that. Maybe you guys will add some. Whether you take it off of 96 or you take it off down to 17, the net is the same to you.
Yeah.
Dick,
Yeah, go ahead.
so on the Saturday meeting, we talked about maybe creative ways we can supplement these positions without hiring new people, like maybe borrowing somebody from the 5th grade or things like that. I was wondering if that was ever looked into
For which positions?
for any of them, but specifically the 4th grade teacher.
Yes, I met with Colleen and we talked about her fall numbers for 5th grade. Would you like to please come on, Colleen, and talk about what you are estimating, please?
All right. Good evening. I'm cold. I'm not trying to run away. That's why I got so I did take a look at like the enrollment numbers, different things like that. And so like for the upcoming school year, we have a projected enrollment of, I think it's between 91 and 94 students. And so looking at the difference between having 5 teachers or 6 teachers, with 5 teachers, it would be a ratio of 1 to 15, and with 6 teachers, and then with 5, it would be 1 to 18. And in teaching, like the teaching sweet spot is 16 for students. You know, all the years that I've taught, that's been the best. It's also thinking about when students are coming into 5th grade and they're making that transition. And we've talked about some of the academic lag with COVID, and we've talked about some of the social, emotional. Smaller class size would be more beneficial. But then looking at the years ahead, the ratios, it would jump if I had 5 teachers instead of the 6. It would be a ratio of 1 to 21, 1 to 23, and 1 to 21, which is a large class size for a 5th grade class.
With your incoming numbers?
With my incoming numbers. So there's a dip next year, but then my numbers are about the same, and then there's that little bubble with 100. So it's 91, 104, 116, 104. So there's a little bit of a change there.
If I understand right, we're talking about hypothetically you lending a 5th grade teacher to Mount Leb, right? For hypothetically for a year, right? And then after that, when your dip comes back, you have that teacher back.
Okay.
It's a way of trying to defer an
I don't think
expense.
that helps, just talking out loud. You would still then need it the next year, Katie, because your numbers keep increasing along, so that might not be a long-term solution. And I think it's more so the difficulty of not knowing students who are going to move in or out in the summer for any of our grades. That's just hard to know. So could you say that again, please? You have 6 teachers currently?
Yeah.
And your ratio for the fall, you think would be how many students per class, please?
15 to 1 if no enrollment changes.
And if it's 5 teachers, it's?
18 to 1.
Thank you.
Mhm. And we have anywhere between, I think last year I had them check, and we had 35 students move in over the summer. And it just happened to be 7th grade this year, but we don't know what grade they're coming into, right? So we have 35 that fluctuate. Plus we have the between 40 and 45 at Grantham that are going to come in at 7th grade too. So we're watching those numbers, knowing that they're coming in to that grade.
Any other questions for Colleen while she's here? I don't think you had any changes in your budget. I think you were.
No. The only thing, I didn't bring a wobble stool, but I can still bring that in. Okay, thank you.
So, can I ask one question? So, with the 4th grade teacher, we had talked a lot about furniture. So, my understanding is the expense related to that 4th grade classroom is not just staff. There's also furniture and setup of that class. Do we know what that cost is?
It was
Hi.
Hi.
That was in the budget, so it was under our furniture budget to furnish the new classroom. So I can go back to, if we look at our furniture line.
It says 69, and you said some of that was for something else too, right?
Have cafeteria tables. So we had the cafeteria tables. It was a $22,200 budget, and it was for the cafeteria tables as well as the desk chairs and bookshelves for a fourth grade classroom.
Doesn't that seem kind of low, though, for furniture, given how much Hanover Street was asking to outfit just one kindergarten classroom? That seems kind of low for outfitting a fourth grade classroom.
Well, we have a number of desks left over from COVID that we plan on recycling. And so it would just be replacing some desks, like some of the older ones. And then it's really the bookshelves that we're doing that furniture rotation for like the new bookshelves. So that one doesn't have any new bookshelves, so that would be the only room that would get that. The tables for the new cafeteria space, I budgeted and we called around and got the best price similar to these. No, those tables is what we're hoping to get.
Any other questions for Katie?
Jack, can you remind me, for your furniture, was that for 3 kindergarten classes or 1 kindergarten class?
One.
One.
Oh, wait, no.
I thought it was for 3.
Yes, 3.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Do you have any other questions? Okay.
Doesn't look like it. In the interest of moving things along a little bit, it seems to me, and anyone who takes issue with this, please say so. It seems to me that this edition is probably the best justified one of any that we're looking at when you're looking at enrollment coming down the road at Mount Leb. And when we look at other options, such as borrowing from the middle school, it turns out to be just a one-year fix. Basically, just have to deal with that again. So it seems to me that that's probably something that we would probably want to leave in the budget. Does that make sense, or is there a sense on the board that we want to talk about this some more and try to find some ways to save that particular amount of money?
I think of all of the additions, I would agree. I think I'm most persuaded by the enrollment numbers and the need for another fourth grade teacher, or a teacher that may not stay with fourth grade depending on how these numbers go, but the flexibility of having an additional teacher. So yeah.
Okay. Steve?
I mean, I think the page that Tim prepared, sort of that the major asks and needs and subtracts. I think of that whole list, that's probably the one item I feel comfortable getting behind. And to pay for that, to be honest with you, and to minimize impact on the rest of the town, I would look at the rest of that list with a very skewed lens to say we should be cutting everywhere we can on that list, other than that teacher.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that those other things aren't important. They're all really important. But in the last year, we invested in our staff with all new contracts. We invested in our buildings. We can't invest in everything in 1 year. So those things perhaps would get invested in next year or next budget cycle. But for now, I think that's the one I could get behind.
I agree with you. Do you want to put that sentiment in the form of a motion for proposing some
Well, I don't-
eliminations?
Wait.
I don't know if other
What did
people want to talk about that first.
No, no,
but-
what-
Well, let's get on the table and see what people think. I mean, what are we talking about? I
Well-
mean, but speaking for myself, when I remember the discussions that we had about the stepped-up enrichment person at the middle school, as well as the tech integrator at Hanover Street School. Both of those are currently, they're getting by now. And I'm wondering if both of those might be something that could be deferred for another year.
I mean, everything
Just
on
putting
this
it out
list,
there.
everything on this list makes our school better, no doubt. But are they critically necessary for this year?
I would just jump in to say that I wasn't at the meeting on that Saturday, but I listened to most of the video. And I also agree that, class size is important, and I would maybe hesitate to take someone away from the fifth grade just because it is a vulnerable year. And once something's gone, it's hard to get it back again, even if it's supposed to be temporary. So I would not really support shifting a teacher from one school to the other school. And I do think it's important to have teachers and small class sizes at that age. In terms of the others, I'm like Stephen, I'm less convinced of their immediacy. Not that they're not necessary and great, but it might be something that is less important this coming fiscal year.
Now, my understanding on the tech integrator is that was going to be partly offset by the tech para, correct? So the savings there would be, I just did a quick calculation, if we didn't do anything there, the savings would be a little under $49,000. Does that make sense to you?
That's absolutely correct.
So I just have a question. I am not necessarily in a different opinion, but when we're talking about teachers, we're also talking directly about our children's experience in the schools versus like classroom renovations or things like that. So I guess I want to understand, and the tech integrator is a bigger question for me than the enrichment teacher. So I guess I want to, before we say we can delay those kinds of conversations for another year, I guess I would want to hear from both Katie and Jack how they see not increasing those or having these positions would directly impact our children's experience in a negative way. Like what is, I guess, what I would want to understand.
Hi again. So if we don't increase the enrichment position, it's currently a 0.4, and if we don't increase it to a 0.8, we'll have to decide if we are going to provide enrichment for all, which is what we're able to do this year, where every grade gets every class gets a 40-minute block of enrichment, and I'll have to make the decision with the enrichment teacher and team to either do that or just provide targeted enrichment to some kids. I won't be able to do both on a 0.4.
How are you doing it now?
We do enrichment for all, so every...
But she's a 0.4 right now, right?
Yes, that's all. So that's all we do. We don't do targeted enrichment this year.
Okay.
So it becomes a one or the other.
There's not enough time in a schedule for her to meet every class and do targeted enrichment. So enrichment for all is literally the entire class participating in a project.
And in your school, how much COVID sort of lag are you seeing? So are we still trying to catch up from sort of the impact of the pandemic?
I think we're going to be catching up with that for a while, when we even think of our kindergartners' social emotional skills, where they are, and they're just starting. Our preschool last year, our 4-year-olds, we could see the impact of COVID, and just meeting with the kindergarten team yesterday, trying to get everyone ready on the same page, both socially, emotionally, and academically, with the basic standards that they need to know by the end of kindergarten. So we're constantly working on that. Also, something that we don't always think about is what kids' experiences are outside of the classroom. And since we've had COVID, there's a lot of kids that spent a lot of time on the screen or on laptops or tablets, as we call them, and we're really trying to work with families and ourselves and getting outside and giving them exposure to rich environments outside of the classroom, and working with we spend a lot of time on our social emotional needs, as well as just experiences. So that will be the decision. That's what we did this last year when it went back to a 0.4. We did a survey to the staff and then really looked at it as a focus group on what we wanted, how we wanted to go about when we just had it as a 0.4. What did we think would be the most beneficial? And we decided the most beneficial was to give everyone enrichment, as opposed to just targeted enrichment.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yep.
So kind of the other side of that, right, is your tech, so you do or do not have a tech integrator currently? I can't remember.
We do not.
I guess, and is it something that your staff would have, desires or is looking for, to have more help with the technology and integrating things into their classroom? I mean, do you feel that part is lacking at your school?
I don't feel that part's lacking right now. I think we'll eventually, I know that at Jack's school, they're ready for that. Our school is still working towards that, but we've spent a lot of investment in our enrichment program and trying to provide that. At my school, I don't think that's lacking, but I haven't surveyed them all to ask them, did you want a tech integrator? But just no. So I didn't survey them to ask that question.
So I guess, can you follow up on that, though? You said that in Jack's school they're ready for, in your school they're not. So I guess,
well, I don't mean not. We're not ready.
I mean, why do you feel like they're not ready to
focus
on?
Okay, I'll give you keyboarding without tears, KWT. So we used to have a computer lab pre-COVID, and we spent a lot of time. The kids would all go there and they would do keyboarding without tears in the computer lab. Then it was awesome. We all have devices in each one of our classrooms. The K1 have iPads, and then the second, third, and fourth grade have Chromebooks. So when I needed to move the para out of the computer lab to support students, and since we didn't have a computer lab, then the keyboarding without tears it's supposed to be done in the classroom. So the expectation at our school is that the teachers add it as part of their either morning routine or find time to add the program. We have the program for them to use, so the teachers can get online. It's pretty self-explanatory. I also kept the hard notebooks in my office for 2 years in case they didn't want to go to the computer, the program, and they wanted the notebook of it, so they could teach the keyboarding without tears. So we've just embedded that. Do I worry that our students won't be as good of keyboarders? I think time will tell. We do a lot of projects where they're on their Chromebooks and they practice typing. Are they as efficient with typing as I would like them to be? Probably, I don't want to say probably not, but I also asked teachers to give me 40 minutes to do a computer lab or 30 minutes to do keyboarding without tears. They'd be like, what else are you going to take off the table, Katie? Because you want me to do a 90-minute ELA block, you want me to do a 60-minute math block, you want me to put social studies and science in my day as well. So we just fit it in.
But I guess my concern is, though, that the students are getting a different experience, technology experience, depending on what side of the division they happen to be on in town, and yet they come together in 5th grade. So are we, by focusing on one thing and not asking for a tech integrator, or putting more focus on a tech integrator in one school and not the other, are we disadvantaging the kids when they come together in 5th grade, and also the teachers in 5th grade, 6th, 7th, that have to now have kids that haven't had as much tech exposure? Or, because it must be more than just keyboarding without tiers.
There is probably a lot more technology and project-based learning on technology. MJ, I don't have the answer for what will happen. I think we could learn a lot from Hanover Street if they get a tech integrator, and maybe not next year, but the following year, because I won't ask for anything. I'm just kidding. We would be like, okay, this is where we need to go. But I don't have that answer for you.
Let's hear from Jack.
Good evening. So my support for this particular position, the technology integrator, I mean, obviously comes from the information and communication technology literacy that we're trying to create a more robust program for our students. I mean, even as you make your way throughout the day, how many times do you not use technology? We use technology more and more every single day, and that's part of the reason why I want to make sure that our Lebanon students have these opportunities to learn at a much younger age and create these skills at Hanover Street School. Whether it be supporting their regular education curriculum, be able to demonstrate their learning in different facets of technology, whether it be a simple Google presentation or whether it be through coding and bots. It's something that I want to make sure that I support for our staff to have a position to help implement them and help students be able to demonstrate their learning through technology.
And Jack, correct me if I'm wrong. Right now, Hanover Street does have a .4 enrichment teacher who does the junior grade books.
We have, yes, a .4 junior grade books instructor.
And she
teacher.
does that for all students.
She does, and that's 2 days a week. Great.
Okay.
And a para technology.
Yes, and we have a technology para, yes, as well, who does support in the classroom. Part of that is trying to, when the teachers are going to be doing keyboarding without tiers, that they're there to support that as well. So this would sort of create a larger, increase the ability to have more availability for this particular person and be able to target this learning through professional development, going to the Kristen McAuliffe Tech Conference, learning any new tech that's coming up, and also help educating our teachers as well, which is not currently the role of the para.
Person's going to be spread awfully thin, yes?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you just outlined a huge brief.
Mm-hmm.
Mary's raising
Go ahead, Mary.
I guess my concern is that we're trying to be equitable, and the computer technical curriculum is for all students throughout the district. So I have the issue with how we not doing it for one school and doing it for another. And I've had that issue for a long time. So, and we could have used it with our students at Mount Leb when I was there, but there was no one. And we had to use our librarian to come and help us when we needed help. So I think it's either one for all or all for none for now until we can afford to do it.
Any other questions for Jack?
So I think my original question was, if we delay it a year, what doesn't get implemented. So you have a tech para, that person would stay in place.
Tech para would stay in place, yes.
So is there any negative impact to the kids in a significant way that the delay would cause?
The delay obviously would prevent any professional development that the person could potentially be bringing for our staff to be able to enhance their own lessons for learning, as well as any other opportunities for next year where students could possibly get a deeper understanding of curriculum through whatever this person, this technology integrator, is going to bring to that curriculum development and instruction. So.
I would also add a little bit of a difference is that the person who was your para was a certified specialist, and she's now hired at the high school. So your school had a person who was wearing the para hat, but actually had all the experience of a person at a teacher level. And so she really took Hanover Street to another level, a lot with 3D printing, connecting math. Whenever I went up there was always projects going on. So in a way, you had a tech integration specialist in your building. She was just a para. She could have left us. She didn't. I'm glad she didn't. And she's now at the high school, bringing that expertise to the high school. So in my years of being here, the reason that Hanover Street was more involved with tech was because you had a specialist in that spot. And Mount Leb never really did. Eloise focused more on the student population, which is a bit different at Mount Leb, and created the enrichment. So they kind of went a little bit divergent, but we've talked multiple times about you're going to be looking at your enrichment support at Hanover Street, what works with your schedule, what works with your staff, your students. And Katie has talked to me about, I really want to be on par with everybody else, so I can only bring so much to my school at a time. We can bite off the enrichment teacher. She knows our families. She's going to seamlessly increase that to the greatest extent. And you are saying I can do the greatest extent with that. And at some point, they should merge together, not far down the line, but within the next year or so. What I've learned with tech integration specialists is if your staff isn't open and used to communicating and collaborating, that person becomes the fixer of laptops and devices. So you have a community that's going to open their doors and really talk about curriculum. They're not just going to be another person in a small office. And that's why you're ready to present that, because you've experienced it at that level for many, many years. And you see a gap because you don't have somebody with that expertise in your building to champion this work at this time. And that's why you're here with that. And the same thing with Katie, that's why she's here with her proposal. Just want to remind the board, like sometimes the history of how these positions come about and the expertise can make a difference as far as how far along our program goes.
What kind of training does the person you've just hired have?
Am I supposed to talk personnel?
Well, I mean, we are.
Right, para-certified.
Paris. I mean, so I guess I don't need to know. Is there any sort of special training beyond any other para?
The person in this position does come from a technology background, has a background in technology. So.
Thanks.
Yeah.
You know, the decision the board has to make is to look at both of these positions and say, are they the both of them truly mission critical this year? I mean, no doubt they would be extremely useful to have. You know, I'm thinking, Jack, one of the things you mentioned would be pertinent for this person to do would be providing professional learning for staff. I mean, if there was some critical need arose, couldn't you bring in a consultant a couple days a year to do some of that instead of having someone on staff. I'm just thinking of ways that you wouldn't tax the time of the person that's already in the budget.
Yeah, with what we've seen, obviously, in the most recent years with professional development time, the time that we have after school for after-school meetings is limited in nature. Most of the experiences and learning experiences that we could use for teachers to enhance is through demonstration. So that's where this would come into play. So if a staff member had an idea about say they wanted to do 3D printing of ancient Greece, they could help facilitate that initially, show the teacher how to do it, and then sort of hand it off to them, and then go to the next classroom to be able to share that same experience. If you bring in a person 1 day or 2 days or 3 days, I haven't seen it stick as much. I mean, it still does, but somebody that is there and consistently, oh, wait, I forgot how you did this. Can you show me again? And then's when people sort of take over and learn and understand the process and continue to use it, whatever it may be.
Can I ask not a Jack question, sorry. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, we're asking all the questions, right? So then I guess the next question I have is the SIS person, right? The part-time SIS person, which we haven't talked about at all. And why this, why now, why part-time, why all those things? It's the Peter question, not a you question, sorry.
So I did discuss this on Saturday's meeting. I met with our administrative assistants who were feeling completely overwhelmed with all of their day-to-day expectations on top of Power School and the number of DOE reports in New Hampshire. That's just, I don't know, I know it's more than double. So I said to them, I will try to figure out a way to support you, and met with Pete. And just this last Thursday, we had a representative for our leadership team from Alma, and that's going to be a huge shift. They tell you it'll be smooth, but we all know what that is like. And so the part-time position would be a point person to go to the conferences for the workshops for the DOE, to really know the ins and outs of Power School in Alma, and to lift some of that burden that our administrative assistants have been so gracious in just taking on, to do the reports that have to be done and all of that. Pete has, over time, become the I4C coordinator. That isn't always the role that a person at his level is taking, so that person could do some of that kind of work so Pete can focus on some of the projects that he said he would like to focus on. I did not want to make it a full-time position. I wanted to make it a part-time position, and it's a position to support and to help our district do a better job with our reporting, to clean the data. So Pete would actually sit there and have to check each individual student's names if there was a little red dot next to it. I don't think that's a good use of Pete's time. I don't think that's a good use of our administrative assistant's time. So that's the concept behind it, and that's why we put it forward. It came from the voices of our own staff asking for support.
Thanks.
I would like to move this forward and move on to some facilities discussions. So my question is there, I'm looking between the enrichment increase at Mount Leb, the tech integrator at Hanover Street School. We have a total there of $89,611. If we want to look at deferring lease of buses for a year, that would add to that. Is there anyone here that wants to make a motion along those lines?
Well, I'll throw something out there, I guess.
Yeah, sure. I'd welcome that. Thank you.
Feel free to throw it down. But can I reference that chart? All right. So I'll say I'll move that we approve the 4th grade teacher for Mount Leb School and not approve the rest of the upper half of that chart.
Can you clarify the upper half?
Well,
What that
there's
means?
two sections on that chart. Right? There's an upper table and a lower table.
So you're talking about everything under the non-facilities major add and subtract?
Correct.
Okay.
I think you'll have to articulate it for the people.
Yeah, don't have the chart.
Well, that's why I said I can reference that chart. So not approve the increased enrichment, not approve the tech integrator, not approve the SIS, and not approve the leasing of 2 buses.
There's a motion by Stephen, second by Aaron. Let's talk about it.
Which would be a total of what?
400,000, 300 and some odd thousand.
It makes it an easy
But
subtraction.
we'd still have to keep we'd still keep the tech parent in that
Right.
scenario.
Correct.
So the 63K would still be there.
Are you doing the math, Tim? I don't want to do it. It would be bad.
You looks like he has a calculator.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm doing it now, subject to someone checking it, but. Okay. I get 179,611.
But don't you have to subtract out the French teacher?
No, that's.
No, or is that already?
I get,
Okay, you're-
I get 165,611. Well, all you do is take the 354,582, subtract the 111,971, and then subtract the 77, right?
No, because you're subtracting out the 30,000 to 60,000.
You have to add the 63.
So I would think you'd take the 111,000, put back in the para for the tech for 63,000, and then take out the French teacher.
So what you need to do is you need to add up 40,640 plus 48,971. That's the net of the tech integrator and the tech para.
Right?
Plus 30,000 plus 60,000.
Correct. What do you got?
I was hoping someone was going to do that.
165,611.
I get 165,611.
And 179,611.
Yeah, that's 175,611 if you don't do anything with the .2 French teacher.
Right.
But you should not. That's just indicating that that's not in the budget right now.
Oh,
Oh,
The point 2 is out of the budget. That's just what I read.
okay.
So it's 179,000.
All right, so 179,611.
Correct.
All right, let's talk about the motion.
Oh, can I?
MJ?
So we haven't talked about buses, so can we talk about the buses? Like, what are the age of the buses that you're expecting to replace? Are they in disrepair? Is it a crisis if we don't do the buses this year? Because I know we had that whole consultant report a couple of years ago.
So I feel we've come a significant way in our fleet. So we have 2 buses coming right now that'll complete the replacement of our oldest buses that were bought in 2011. So these 2 buses continue the renewing of our fleet over a period of time. So our oldest buses, these buses replace buses that were bought in 15, 16, which, believe it or not, was 7 to 8 years ago. So we want to replace buses between 7 and 10 years. It's always a discussion, right? Because they don't have a lot of miles on them, but the winters are brutal. So, for transparency, I put that on there to be as forthcoming as you could. But I'd love to keep replacing buses a couple at a time because they get older and they start breaking down. As far as repairs, I don't know that. And we're going to fix a bus. If we don't get the buses, we're going to fix them. And most buses are fixable. It's just a matter of when you're going to spend, $3,000 a year or $15,000 a year. So, it's prudent to continue to replace our oldest buses only a couple at a time. It keeps the lease line is flat in the budget. So, if you were looking through the budget for major increases, you wouldn't see that in there, but I wanted to be transparent and show that that line could go down by 60,000 if we don't replace buses. It's wise to keep doing it. The other thing I mentioned is that we're getting away from diesel. So I feel, one, we're getting rid of a dirtier fuel. Two, diesel buses have to be plugged in. So as we flush out our diesel buses, we'll still have a few left after this. I think 3 after, because the 2 buses we got last year are gas. The 2 that are on order are gas. So I think we have 3, if you guys keep these in, I think we have 3 remaining running by diesel. Why is that important? Besides fuel, diesel buses have to be plugged in. And it's amazing how much money, it was thousands of dollars when it's been a couple of years since we looked at it, but who knew that plugging a bus in all winter was going to be, $2,000 a bus. So we removed cold starting issues where we have to call a mechanic out at 6 o'clock in the morning because the bus won't start. We removed the need to plug them in, the maintenance for the plugs. So I just think it makes a lot of sense to keep this program moving. But obviously, it's your decision.
Tim, I agree that it makes sense to keep it moving. But I mean, right now, with the buses we got this year, the older buses have all been replaced. Right now, you're talking about replacing buses that are 6, 7 years old?
7 to 8 years.
7, 8 years old?
Depends on obviously, it was a 15, 16 year, so it depends on manufacture date, but they're between 7 and 8 years old.
I just want to point out that that it's not really old buses. Go ahead. Wendy, you had something.
So I'm going to diverge slightly and sort of follow the line of thinking that I had when we had these meetings. So the Saturday meeting. So when I was looking sort of generally or globally, it looked like at least for the last 2 budgets, we over budgeted by 5%. And that allowed us to send $1 million back to taxpayers, put money in the funds that we usually fund every year. So my question or my wonder is, like, we can continue sort of looking at small details that we know have impact, or we could sort of think globally about the budget and 1%, even if we said, I mean, what I don't have is the historical data to know if that 5% over budgeting has occurred prior to COVID, or, so is that typical? Because if it is typical, then it seems like we could comfortably say we could reduce the budget by by 1%, which is about 500,000, and sort of figure out where, because it seems like there are places, when I went through the budget, there are places that are consistently over budgeted, and some by a lot. So, but I don't have the historical data to know how true that statement or my sort of.
If I could.
Yep.
I wrote down the term over budgeted because obviously this is my world. I understand that term. I don't like that term. If we budget something at $3 a gallon and we get it for $2 a gallon, is it over budgeted or is it wise spending? So when we finish the year with a unexpended funds, it's not because that teacher costs $80,000, but we budget $100,000. That's over budgeting. But it might very well be because we budget a Master's 6 and we hire a Bachelor's 30. It might be because we got a good fuel contract. It might be because we anticipated a 7% increase in electricity and it came in at 5%. Or, a lot of times it's, we budget you to put 2% into your 403B, but you chose not to. So there's a myriad of reasons why it can be unexpended. Being overexpended is a good way to get yourself in trouble with the law. So obviousyou have to choose between the two. Under is way better. We're budgeting 18 months out, so there's a level of intelligence and good management, I guess, and making sure that you reasonably budget, but budget for a scenario you can't possibly see in 18 months. So I think it's a narrow view that says, well, they finished 5% under budget, they must just budgeted too much, when it's certainly a much more complex situation than that, and usually is a result of good negotiating, good deals, a little bit of luck in hiring someone who's qualified but might be cheaper, or a number of different factors. So,
But, and I don't disagree, but the question is if we're consistently 5% in the positive, so does that, is it fair to say that we consistently have room in the budget to allow for us to spend this money?
this budget does its best to assume not very good economic factors. So this may be the year where every bit of the expense we budget for. I mean, I won't tell you the tens of thousands of dollars bill we just got for fuel oil at the SIU. So this may be, is this the year to say, well, you're usually 5% over, so you can cut it by $500,000, but we're trying to budget in an era of 8% inflation 18 months out. Obviously, I'm going to get a little concerned about that. That's my job. I understand your point, but it's a little worrisome to do that now, I guess.
Wendy, I also know exactly where you're coming from. I for a number of years was beating that drum, particularly on what we budget for benefits for our employees, which were routinely over, not by 5%, but by much larger amounts. And I've been, I don't know if the word is persuaded or worn down, that if we're going to be responsible, that the way to that we have to let Tim do his best estimates, and if we want to do cuts, to make them focused, rather than saying, well, we know we're always 5%, 10%, in some cases 20% over.
I think
it just doesn't go anywhere.
I think what's challenging, though, I think at the start of the conversation, in order to make a meaningful impact, we're realistically looking at a $500,000 cut. And I don't see, so if we can't get to 500,000, then I would rather leave the asks in, because it's not going to make that big of an impact to say no to these.
Well,
so if we're only going to get to 100,000.
Let's let others weigh in. I mean, I would argue that every little bit counts, and we've had these arguments before that if it only impacts the tax rate by 5 cents per thousand, then it's not worth doing. And I would argue that these things can be additive, and maybe we don't hit 600,000 out of the budget, but I mean, it certainly benefits the taxpayer if we hit 300,000. But anyway, I saw some hands over here.
Well, I mean, just to your point, yes, 5 cents per thousand isn't tremendous, but it's coming at the same time that most of us got a 15 or 20% increase in our property taxes. So cumulative, it is impactful. But I guess what I was going to ask, and maybe you've addressed it, is from an administrative perspective, what do you prefer? Us going line by line and picking and choosing and cutting here and cutting there, or saying, you know what, we want you to cut 1% or the 500,000, and you use your judgment, or the administrative team come up with a way to trim that 1%.
I prefer you to play with this list and see what you want or don't want. If you say, you did this year, $250,000, and the budget came, the budget that was posted and the budget we're operating under is $250,000 less than what we asked for. Here we are, almost January, middle of December, and we've identified ways to do, I said this before, but in order to post the budget, I had to take the money out of somewhere, some functional line. So the budget that got posted took it out of the 2620 line because it's really the cleanest thing to do. So here we are, middle of December, and I'm confident we're going to be able to do most of those projects that we were wondering about. But it's not best practice, I guess I'd say, to use the language of the day to say, find $500,000, and then 3-4 months in, you're still trying to figure out what's going on. So, from my perspective, it seems to be best practice to say, you know what, don't do this. But
Because there are many other things that we know have been asked for that aren't on this ask list. So a lot of the furniture conversation that we had, for example, last time is not on this list, but we know it's out there. So there are a lot of things that are in this general budget that have some latitude that we can apply.
That's an approach this board has taken in the past. It's not a popular approach.
Dick, I'm very curious about why there's so much change.
I'm sorry?
I said, I'm curious about why you've changed so much and why I have to play your role.
It's called spreading the assets.
just for your edification, I did put up the fund balance history since 2007. 2014 is the year that Joanne and I arrived, fiscal year 2015. So you'll see the work we've done to bring down the end of year fund balance. Last 2 years has I've mentioned, I'm not going to go into detail, but there was some issues over the last 2 years as far as the audit claiming and then the big payment we got from the city the 1 year. So, but you can see we've brought that number down from well over almost $2.5 million down to around $1 million. The other risk, and I know you can evaluate how much should be in your mind or not, but if you reduce the budget by an arbitrary number like $500,000, and we finish the year with $500,000 left at the end of the year, okay, that's good. That state's happy. But you don't have $1 million to offset next year's taxes, so that's an increase in the tax rate. So you might say it's 96 cents, but if you don't have $1 million, it's 96 cents plus whatever you're missing from that $1 million. And you don't fund the capital reserve fund. So I've mentioned this before, it's kind of we've tried to bring the fund balance down slowly to try to minimize the pain, but the fact of the matter is the budgets have been made with $1 million fund balance the last several years. When you say the budget's going to be 96 cents, you're already assuming that's $1 million contributed from this year ending. And 2 years from now, you better make sure you assume $250,000 or something less than $1 million, and that's going to show up in your tax rate that you're saying this budget, which is a 1% increase in expenditures, but the tax rate's still going up $1. Why? Because we can't assume $1 million coming back. So it's a bit of a circle you get caught in, but I want you to be aware of that.
Yeah, and that's always been the other side of this. We want to see the unexpended fund balance shrink, and we understand that in essence that is people prepaying the next year's taxes, and to the extent that we shrink that, it means we can't offset it. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. And the nice thing about this is that we've been sort of engineering a soft landing. Well, there's a motion on the table, just in case anyone had forgotten.
So can we talk, because you said you wanted to talk about this before we talked about the building projects, but can we talk about them at the same time? I mean, can we leave the motion for a minute and talk about the building stuff?
I'd be reluctant to do that, Lil, because I think that it's only good practice to deal with a motion that's been made, and if the motion fails, then it can be in part resurrected as part of a secondary discussion. But I think a motion's been made and seconded. We've already started the discussion. I think we really should act on it.
It's just because they're so intertwined, right? Like
Yeah.
all of these things are, just because they're two separate charts doesn't mean that they're the overall things that we need to cut are happening in two separate places. So that's why I'm
True. And
wondering.
we're going to have a similar discussion on those, too.
Right, exactly. So
All right, well, in order to expeditiously move on to the second part of the chart and see where we stand, are there other comments to be made on the motion that's on the table? Any arguments to be made?
Well, we could, if Lil wanted, she could ask to have the motion tabled, right?
can I ask to have the motion tabled? Right? Until we come back to talk about it? I mean, because it feels like right now, if I were whatever I'm voting on for chart number 1, for lack of a better thing, whatever I'm voting on with this one, for me, is dependent on what I'm voting on for the second chart. So I can't, or at least dependent on the discussion about the second chart.
Yeah, different people have different ways of looking at that. I mean, I view the second chart as an opportunity to make deeper cuts.
I do too, but I mean, they're all opportunities to make cuts or not, but I think that we're cutting from the same place. So the discussions are therefore germane to each other. So I am asking if we can table the first motion until we've talked about the second chart, at least.
I think we're checking Robert's.
He's checking Roberts. It's fine. Sorry, what, Jim? I can't.
Stephen would have to table it because he's the one who made it.
I don't think so.
It's probably the chair's problem. I'm happy to propose that.
Yeah, you could just make it look easier, cleaner.
Dick, do you want me to propose that?
What?
As it was my motion, if I propose tabling it, does that help?
Maybe.
Well, I'm happy to do that if nobody objects. But it seems that everyone wants. I'm fine with that. As long as we come back to it.
Yeah, I just want to, just give me 30 seconds. Well, the purpose of the motion to lay on the table is to enable an assembly by majority vote and without debate to lay a pending question aside temporarily when something else of immediate urgency has arisen or when something else needs to be addressed before consideration of the pending question is resumed. In ordinary societies is rarely needed, blah, blah, blah. So I guess it's fair. Take a majority vote.
We're missing a few, though.
We took a break. We have a majority now.
They were hoping you were going to take 30 more seconds.
All right, I guess we can give them a few minutes.
What's that?
that we table the discussion of Steve's motion temporarily while we discuss the second chart.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
And this requires a majority vote. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All opposed? 3. The motion passes. We will lift that from the table later on. Okay. So, Lil, what do you want to talk about on facilities?
So the first question I have is I don't think we ever really talked about the replacement of the outside doors at LMS. That wasn't something that came up, I don't remember, so can we talk about that briefly?
Very simple. The doors that were in there are original equipment, and after 12 years of rain and snow and salt, they're starting to corrode at the bottom. And so
These are these doors, right? Like this gym and cafe. So this is.
It's out that way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, behind. if you go
The
to
kitchen doors.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they need to be replaced. So that's a major project. It's a need to, not a want to. If this gets cut out of the budget, then it'll certainly be on an end-of-year list, and you'll see it at the worst-case scenario next year. It's got to be done before they fall apart. And they're expensive. I know it sounds odd to say 12 grand for a door, but not making it up. Everybody knows.
It's right here. And then the 2 classrooms that are being renovated, we have a regular renovation schedule, right, for those classrooms. Do we know which ones those are and how dire they are and what's going on with that?
I don't have with me what ones they are. I can probably find out by digging through stuff. How dire they are. This is a part of our classroom renovation schedule, so it's not like anything's falling apart. But as you know, we've been replacing one a year or renovating one a year on each side of town, and this keeps the schedule going. And I know in Mount maybe the principals know. I know in Mount Lev it's a funky shaped room. I was talking to Steve about that. But it's not like, it's just the next one in the wing or the next one in line.
I can talk about it. I can talk about that room. So that room will have to be updated a little bit because it was a computer lab. And so if you go into the room, there's these poles with electrical cords that need to be taken out of the ceiling and moved over. Otherwise, it looks like all the other classrooms in the upper wing, the upper top. But those poles do have to come out.
Dick, so since we have all our administrators here, we're looking at a list of major adds and subtracts. And we're focusing in on these details, but do the administrators feel that there are other places in their budgets that they would rather give up something in order to get what's on this list?
Okay, I'll come back. Yes, I would be willing to give up the cafeteria tables and use the old cafeteria tables that fold down. It's something that's not a huge expense. I would say that I would give up the rest of the furniture, but I do need shelves for a new classroom, and because there aren't a lot of built-ins in that room, so that's a little tough. Do I think?
Shelves from Hanover Street School from the thing that is getting made into the kindergarten.
Maybe that would work. Same with that. I would be willing to give up my furniture budget and figure that out to get back the 22,000. Mm-hmm. Yes. There you go. And I can look for some more if you need me.
In trade for what?
I guess I'm going to have to ask for the administrators' help if we go down this path, because it's not going to be easy for me to find such and such numbers. So I'm going to leave my furniture budget. Either I pull up everything that's 5730, or else we get some sort of consensus as to what number that means, because I don't have the detail of that stuff in my head like some of the other stuff.
We're also talking a magnitude of ranging from cuts of 500,000 to Katie's 20,000 in furniture, and so I don't know if that's a bit of a rabbit hole to go down and say, where are you going to find 15 and where are you going to find
Well, I'm just,
whatever, so it's a
we're
little
being asked to focus on this list, but what is not clear is they've got big budgets, and so if they feel like there's 40,000 in their budget somewhere else, that's a reasonable question, is it not?
Well, this is coming back to what Steve brought up before, except in a more limited way, right? Not looking at the entire school district budget and say, cut out X number of dollars. But if that's the exercise we're going to go through, look at this 503,457 and pick a number that we can live with and say, push it back on the on the building principals and say, okay, which of these do you want, and which are you willing to pay for in some other way? In other words, just focus on this one page. Yeah, Aaron.
As most of you know, I'm in facility management, so this bottom portion of the page is pretty near and dear to my heart. It's stuff I deal with every single day. But when our business is down, we don't continue to spend. We only spend it on the critical and safety items until business goes back up. So our budget is really high this year. Our increase is really high this year because of various things. I don't think we should spend any of this unless there's safety issues at this point. Tim, can you tell us which of these items are safety issues or must absolute haves?
I think isn't the window leaking at Mount Leb, the library one? And I believe fencing you brought forward as a safety issue at Mount Leb, Katie.
I'll go back, yes. We are not a closed campus at this point. There's an open and a fence, so I really need to have closed. The round window in the library is like a crack in the seal at the bottom, so that needs to be updated. Or either a new window or fixed, or something needs to happen. We can bring in someone else to see if we could get that decreased, but it hasn't. It's like the trim has just kind of worn out in that circular window.
Could I ask about the security cameras at LHS? I know it's not a lot of money, but is that related to the renovation front entrance?
Who's asked that question?
Me.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, Ian, but, we're just evaluating where there are dead spots or blind spots on our campus constantly, so that's a desire to...
So we've identified a couple of locations where we could really use a couple of cameras, but the rest of the pieces on that list, I feel we have an obligation to the Ashe family to make that field, to provide a little bit of work to aesthetically improve that facility in order to embrace the field dedication a bit. But we have flexibility. Our items on that list are limited, but I don't disagree with Aaron.
I would say the middle school, is it safety? I don't know if it ranks as safety, but I think it's a pretty critical thing to do is replace those doors. I mean, at some point, it's going to be safety because they're going to... We just want to replace them before they fall off the hinges, or there's holes in them.
I hear you. I have doors that are rusted out on the bottom. I know what you're doing.
At Hanover Street, renovated classroom and floor upgrade, those aren't safety or critical things. I hate using language like that because I think replacing the classrooms every year is very important. I think it's, and I don't think you would disagree, that I think it's, irresponsible to just leave your facility set and not address it. And the plan we've had in place now for more than half a decade is working great. But it doesn't, I don't think it meets the criteria you set up.
But Tim, we have just to continue your argument, we have been on a very regular plan of classroom improvements for many years. It's been more than a half a decade. But this is a special year. We have half of the half of the increase that we're looking at already is this bond that that the voters approved last year. And there's nothing we can do about that. We're not spending the money yet, but we're paying the interest and the principal on it. We're asking the voters to approve a couple significant labor contracts. And so I find, Aaron, I find your argument very persuasive.
Agree.
Could I just make one comment? I do as well, although I worry that, I mean, I guess I would just throw it out there, like, if we say we're going to delay the classroom renovations, I know we've been doing them every year, and I'm sure the teachers and staff look forward to how that's going, because obviously we don't have the money to do the school fully, any of the schools fully. So if we get off track of that, I know it might not be an immediate safety issue, but are we going to be in a position a year from now to say, oh, whatever, our taxes aren't going up? I mean, it seems like our taxes are going up anyway in Lebanon. I just wonder, is this something like a one-year thing? And we could say, okay, next year we'll pick it up again and continue with the renovation, which is, you know, slow and steady down the hallways? Or do we then take it out of the budget and then it doesn't really get put back in again? I think it's a little bit like the buses that you're talking about. You know, is it enough money to say this is a good savings for 1 year? Or is it, you know, messing up our plan, our long-term plan for the facilities, which we're already in trouble because the facilities have aged? I don't know.
I guess honestly, I would say as someone who's been here this is my 9th year, they've come out of the budget before, and especially early on, they came out a couple times, and I guess I feel like there's a success because the last couple of years they've been in the budget. But if they come out of the budget, you won't lose track of it because we won't let you. Like, it'll be end of year stuff. It'll be in next year's budget. We'll try to do a couple. So we won't lose sight of it, I guess is my point. You know, and it's.
So that's kind of a life of a facilities guy. You get told no, you get told no, you get told no, but you keep asking because that's the right thing to do. That's what his job is to keep asking every single year until the schools are pristine, which they never will be. It's our job to make sure that the taxpayers are looking at this number and saying, you know, the board did the best they could to limit the spending this year because it's high.
Aaron, do you want to make a motion on that, on these facilities projects, sparing the security camera in the
Dick,
playground fence?
just, do we have to go back to the tabled motion first, or, okay.
Sure, I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion that we remove all projects with the exception of the library window, the playground fencing, the outside doors at LMS, and the security cameras at the high school.
Can you repeat that list again?
The Mount Lev School library replacement, playground fencing, the Lebanon Middle School outside doors, and the high school security cameras.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about the art room sink replacements? I don't know what my question is. What? Can you tell me something about them?
We received new sinks this year. We believe that there might be the need for another sink, and that's why that money is in there. Both Steve and Tim are aware of those projects. So I'm not sure if it's absolutely necessary, you know, if they're not going to be able to keep the art room clean or clean up after their pottery set. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
And Ian, before you leave, me again, can
Yep.
you say about the field irrigation updating? Because I would have thought that would have been kind of connected to the track irrigation
Right.
stuff.
And so I don't know if you're more familiar about that, Mike. I guess the way the irrigation system is laid out on the field is not ideal in order to keep we spend a lot of money maintaining these grass fields, and I think the renovation to the irrigation system is recommended in order to maintain our fields to their current condition. That's my understanding.
And the water
Yeah,
is supposed
I
to
guess
be
I'd say
ready on the track.
coming out of the track renovation, we noticed that not we, meaning Dana and I, or Steve and I, but we, meaning the track guys and our maintenance guy, that there's, our field maintenance person, that there's 2 lines of irrigation down basically the hash marks of the field, and there really should be a 3rd one down the middle, and that's what this is, along with the tie-in figures to it. So, just full disclosure, it's, it really should be there. We haven't had it, and our fields generally look great. So I think Ian
I agree with that.
appropriately said,
They look great without it.
Correct. The way it's set up now, the infrastructure of the irrigation system seems to work. We have nice fields. I'm not a turf expert, so.
But is the water getting onto the track so that it will be?
I'm not sure the water on the track.
that was noticed, but that's not really part of this project. We need to re-aim those heads.
Okay.
So we're going to do that. It's just part of our maintenance program.
But I suspect we could do without that this year.
So the motion then, just to recap, is to, right now, the request is for $225,875. The motion would remove $188,275, leaving $37,600 for the items Aaron mentioned, the Mount Lebanon School Library window replacement, playground fencing, the middle school outside doors, and the high school security cameras. Anyone else want to weigh in on this before we take a vote?
Can I just say that if we do have end-of-year funds, can we prioritize the renovation of the classrooms?
That's a separate debate we have every year, right?
What's that?
This is a debate we have every year,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. All right, let's vote on the motion. I just repeated that. I'm not going to repeat it again. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's unanimous. Now, can we lift the other motion from the table, please?
Yes.
I don't think a vote is required.
Yeah, I think
to
we
do
just bring it
that.
back, right?
Whether it is or it isn't, I'm just going to say the chair has lifted it from the table.
I agree.
And what we were looking at was a motion to change the, Tim, what is it? I have 179,611. Is that's what's removed, or that's what remains?
Decreased by 179,611.
Decreased by 179,611, which basically is achieved by removing all of the requests except for the 4th grade Mount Lebanon school teacher. People want to express their views on this before we vote? Yeah, MJ.
I'm in favor of that motion because I think that as a district, that one of the goals of the new superintendent and the administrative team needs to be to develop a long-term plan regarding the tech integrator and enrichment philosophy at both our schools so that we can bring equity to the schools. I realize that we're trying to do some of that now. We had some divergent philosophies back when we had 2 different principals. but I'm uncomfortable adding more money into both of those areas without kind of a path forward as to how we're going to bring equity to all of our students in K through 4 throughout the district, especially since they get unified once they start in 5th grade.
So I heard Katie say that she was willing to give up $22,000 of furniture budget, and if she could find 20 or 18,000 more, then that would be that enrichment position. And it feels to me like it should be up to her to make that choice, since it's such a $40,000 is not a lot of money. I mean, if she can find it and she wants to, it seems like that would be a good piece for our administrator to do and not us. As far as the tech integrator, I think that we can parlay that. I feel like that's something that's reasonable. The bus leases also seem to be something that's reasonable, but the SIS part-time, we are leaning really heavily on people who are untrained to do work that is requiring a higher and higher level of training for technology. And I don't know exactly if there's something else that the people at the SAU would like to try and find to provide this $30,000 that we would be spending to preserve this position. But if there is, it feels like it should be up to them to decide it, to decide what the priority is. If Joanna's saying that these people really need this, it feels like they should get to decide what they want to take out of the budget to make it happen, I guess. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Which sounds remarkably along the lines of what I was asking earlier, is can we set a dollar amount and then ask the people who are closest to those decisions to say, this is what I prioritize and I can give up this in order to get there?
I have to say I'm kind of moved by MJ's argument that this is something that can be thought out over the period of the next year or so. And I would further say if the Mount Nut principal can save $22,000 by reusing furniture on behalf of the taxpayer, thank you. I wouldn't necessarily make a quid pro quo out of it. Yeah, Aaron.
So were you saying that Katie is just cutting the 22, but she's not putting it toward the enrichment teacher, and so she's saving the taxpayers that amount? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I just wanted to repeat. That's what I heard. There's 2 different ways of thinking about what you said.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to be ambiguous. So,
I understood.
yeah, Aaron.
So I'd like to agree with MJ. I think that the enrichment and the tech integrator are bigger than one school. I think the 2 schools need to be equitable and they should align. And I think we need to figure that out before we start adding more teachers to the loop.
Can I make a comment? So I'm going to take the opposite opinion, which surprises me tonight because I didn't come here thinking that I would. But what I heard Joanne say, what I heard Jack say is we were fortunate to be paying a para rate for a tech integrator that we had and developed a program. So yes, it's costing more money to have an official tech integrator, but it sounds like a lot of the programs already existed at Hanover Street School, so it's not really about bringing something new or doing something new in that school. It's just supporting a program that was already in place, that potentially the para that we have is not equipped to fill those same shoes. So I would support that just based on that. And I do think that in the elementary schools especially, I think we see it throughout the district, but in the elementary schools especially, we're still dealing with the after effects of COVID. And I think these 2 positions, the enrichment teacher and the tech integrator, are direct student-facing positions. And I would like to support our elementary schools and our students in those schools in any way we can. And so if that means having this kind of support in those rooms to start their education in a positive way, that to me makes sense to spend. It's not a lot of money, even though it is money.
So are you saying that if we had to find money to cut, how would you recommend doing it?
I think my statement is just that I support the enrichment to increase that to a 0.8 and to have the tech integrator at the high school. I'd love to see less money in the budget, but I don't know. I'm not speaking to that at the moment.
Okay.
But if Katie can find it, awesome.
All right, so just to recap, the motion that's before us is to reduce this request for $384,582 by $179,611. Is there any further discussion before we vote on this?
I thought his motion was more specific and specifically said fourth grade teacher.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, that's the net effect. But
Right, but I think you're clouding the issue if you don't.
I didn't mean to change the spirit of the motion.
Well, it's to preserve the request for the fourth grade teacher. The net result, though, the mathematics of it is exactly as you described.
All right, so I will correct myself and say the motion we're voting on is to preserve in the budget the addition of a fourth grade teacher, and then to remove the remaining items totaling $179,611. Okay, let's vote on the motion. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Opposed? 7 to 2, the motion passes. Is there other action to be taken on the budget? I know, Tim, you want to talk about the default budget. And I guess my question is, are there other adjustments that people want to make, either on the positive or the negative side? And if not, when can this board approve the budget? Because I think we're very close. I'm not sure we can we do it tonight? I mean, if we gave you a few minutes, could you give us a number we could vote on, or do you need some time?
Yeah, just a few minutes. I'm almost done.
Can we, just to clarify, and so if principals go back and relook and refine the funding that like Lisa was talking about, can they decide to make that switch so the total amount is not different? Or, because there's a philosophical question too, and I just didn't want to leave that on the table, because some people felt strongly that we need more time to get both schools talking the same talk before we add an integration specialist and an enrichment person. Then there was a conversation about if you can find the money, go ahead and do the enrichment. So I'm just clarifying for the next superintendent that comes in, post this budget, what are your thoughts about those two things? It's the bottom line number, but there's also the philosophy.
Can I ask you a question, Joanne? Do you think that they can have these conversations and get on the same page about these things by the end of this year? I mean, we're talking about next year, so it would be a year and a half before they'd have the opportunity to have these two positions in place.
Looking at Jack and Katie, we've already had these conversations about how you're going to maybe not be exact replications because of the different schedules that each school has, but you're both heading in that direction, that Jack and Katie is accurate, and it's just a matter of a year or two before Jack comes back and does a presentation on his enrichment program and what he might need, and then Katie comes back and says, well, also I've learned from Hanover Street what I want to implement. we talked about integration specialists when we did the high school one and then the middle, and we just weren't ready to really talk about the elementary one at that time. And now with the changing of the positions, Jack wanted to bring that forward. So I would say that based on kind of the EC conversation that I heard was happening, that while I'm still boots on the ground, I can assist in moving some things along and maybe have a commitment from Hanover Street and a commitment from Mount Lev in how they're going to both support students for enrichment and that by the end of the school year this year, because it is part of our plans to do that beginning the conversation, and then the new superintendent can just pick up from wherever that conversation left off. They might have a different philosophy or something to add and bring that to the board at the budget next year.
Is there any one of the keywords not working? Is there something I need to do? Pete, my keyboard just, I can't input anything anymore. I'm only one number away from being done.
Joanne, can I speak to your question? While he's figuring that out. I agree that I think it would be a good idea to philosophically to align the two schools. So I'm supporting what MJ is suggesting. But yeah, I think you're putting the trying to speed up the process, I think, is all good. So I think a lot of what we're talking about is not against the enrichment or tech integration, but rather the money at this point, but with the caveat that we do want both schools to be doing the same kind of stuff, especially since they funnel together in 5th grade. But so I just wanted to throw that out there, but we're talking about the budget for 23-24, which is next school year. So technically, they would be hiring someone this spring and over the summer and to start in August. So it's not, I heard 18 months or so, but it's basically would be in like 6 months.
But if we cut it, if they don't fund it.
If we cut it and bring it up next year.
Then
right.
it's another whole.
So you have cut it, or you've removed that amount. So I'm trying to understand the philosophical, even if Jack goes back and Katie goes back and flips things around and they say, this is so important to us, we found the funds. That doesn't impact the taxpayers' dollars. Do I say go ahead then and do those positions? Or do I say the board does not want you to go forward with these positions at this year, please keep that information for the next superintendent. I just didn't want to misstep going forward.
I think that when Wendy pointed out earlier, and we've talked about with Jack and Katie before, so the tech integrator position did exist before, for all intents and purposes, with the para that existed at the time. The enrichment before COVID existed to a certain extent. So I don't think that these are, I agree with MJ, and I agree, I've said this myself, I think that we do need a plan. I think we need equity at the schools. However, we already have these to a certain extent. We've already had them at the places where they are. So we'd sort of be returning to what we were pre-COVID normal, the pre-COVID normal. However, I don't think that obviates the need to have an articulated philosophy and an articulated plan, and to be having the goal be, and not, I think it's important to say, we keep saying, well, we can talk to Katie, we can talk to Jack and talk to them about doing this. I think it needs to be a district goal, a district imperative that we want equity at these schools, right? This is not just on the shoulders of the principals of these two schools.
No, it's not. And we began to do really good technology standards work, as the principals know, right when the pandemic hit. So we have to go back. I know that Karen Dubois met with our media specialists and tech integrators to look at our tech curriculum. So that's what's in my mind, is I need to talk with her, find out how much work was done with that, and then obviously sharing that out with whoever's the tech person if Jack goes that direction, and with Katie, to make sure that we are district standards based, not just this is how we use it in this building and this is how we use it in another.
But I think I'm saying even beyond that, not just that district standards, but that it is a district priority or a district philosophy that we want the experiences of the kids at both sides of the town to be very similar as possible. So I think that's what we're sort of circling around, the board is circling around. So that's the philosophy that we're talking about. Now, does implementing, if you can find the money and put in a tech integrator or a enrichment position, does that go against that philosophy? I mean, we don't have that philosophy articulated. Does it go against what the board wanted? I don't think so, based on what we've been talking about. If you could find the money, but that's me personally. I don't know if the rest. Aaron wants to say something.
I would say that if we have a plan to make both schools the same, I think it still needs to come to the board because we're adding positions. And once we add positions, they're most likely there forever. And I think we should at least get a cut on that before they get hired.
And I would also say that by cutting and then adding it, to me, that kind of feels a little underhanded and goes against the spirit of what we had tonight here, which was, again, wanting to have a district philosophy and going back on, well, we had it, so let's just enhance it because we can find money somewhere else at the expense of something else. I think that doesn't go with the intent of at least of how I voted tonight at the board, and I think that's kind of circumventing the process, as Aaron said, adding positions without really bringing it back to the board.
And that's why I asked, because I felt that there were different opinions of different board members on the vote that went beyond the money for the vote, and I just didn't want to do something and have half the board be frustrated and say the superintendent didn't do what she was supposed to do because I voted this way, and the other half saying, well, it would be fine if they did it. Maybe I'm seeking a motion for clarity.
Well, I just want to be totally clear that everybody understands that equity doesn't always mean the same. Equity, you're meeting the people that are in your population where they are to get them to where you want them to be, but that doesn't mean that all the people are going to be all the same, and if we teach them all the same things that they're going to end up in the same place. That's not what it means. So we have to be really careful to understand the populations that we have in both of the schools, and that enrichment for one group may mean something very different. And we keep talking about background knowledge and being careful that we cultivate background knowledge, and in doing so, you create a better student. Well, you know, there's kids who come from backgrounds where their background knowledge is very vast, and then there's kids who don't. And so we just need to be really careful that, you know, a tech integrator in both places isn't going to necessarily reap the same result in both schools. So we have to trust that the people who are leading these schools understand their population better than we do. We do know some because our kids have gone, many of us, our kids have gone to the schools, but I want to be really, you know, just say no to something, even though something is better than nothing. To me, something is better than nothing, period. So if the professional people decide that what they need is what they need, who are we to say? I guess I just don't understand that philosophy. We don't have a specific philosophy yet. We can vote a philosophical idea, but we have not fleshed out anything that even is close to equitable or inclusive yet in our district. We haven't said what those things mean for either of those elementary schools. And so I just want to be sure that we keep that in our minds as we're cultivating this knowledge for ourselves, that having two things that are the same doesn't necessarily mean that it's equitable. That's all.
So then, to take that a step further, I guess I would wind up in a position of saying, in the absence of a coherent plan for either of these initiatives, the board would not necessarily want people to get in and play with these numbers to restore these positions that we're requesting. We want to hear a plan.
Well,
So-
you may think that, but I don't agree.
I think we
Well,
need
that's
a
what
motion.
I thought you
Yeah.
were saying.
I think we need a motion.
Okay, well, I think I agree, the superintendent would like a motion, and it can be a motion to allow building administrators to make adjustments in their budget within the financial limits that we just voted on, to restore some of these positions by finding the money somewhere else. That could be one motion, or the other motion could be that
Can we add?
That these cuts are targeted at those positions, and we are not giving license to restore them.
Can we, with the first statement that you said, can we add that there has to be a plan in place prior to the person being hired? I mean, I don't know how quickly they can sort of come. So if we state the first one, but we want to also honor what everybody's saying and that we need to have some articulation.
I can let Joanne weigh in on this. I'm a little leery about taking a portion of the budget and saying, okay, we're giving you freedom to do this, but come back to us and let us approve it again.
No, I don't need to approve it again.
Is.
I just, with the understanding that there would be what people are asking, that there would be a plan in place for these positions. Like, that work needs to be done.
I don't think that that's going to be, I mean, I don't disagree, but I think you're asking the impossible to have a whole district philosophy written, rubber stamped, and approved prior to the July 1 start date. I mean, I think they have a plan currently for the positions that each school is asking for, and it's justified, but I think we're saying that we need to have a deeper dive in a district philosophy, which I don't think that's something that's going to be developed in the next 4 months. And realistically recruit and hire for these positions.
So I don't know if that's true, because we've seen a partial plan at EC, right? They just barely showed one, and we had lots of conversation about it. There's already been lots of conversation about it, and it does feel like it's something that is, depending on how much time they want to put into it, is something that is much closer to being done than not done, right? So I would say that they're actually fairly far along in that process already. So yes, it could be, I think, but again, I'm not the
I
administrators.
hope they're not too far along, because no one except DC has heard this.
No, because we have sent it back. It's a draft, right? It's a draft. So it's far enough along to come to us, and we said, okay, we need to have some more questions, and went back. But it was super productive, and what they already have come up with is very thoughtful and helpful. So that was good. But yeah, that would have to come to the board eventually. But could it come to the board in a timely manner? I mean, in this sort of timeline that you're talking about, I think possibly yes.
I prefer positive motions to negative ones, because it eliminates some of the double negatives. So superintendent would like a motion. Would someone care to make a motion and put this in your own words, to permit the administration to restore some of the positions that we have eliminated by finding savings elsewhere in the budget to make up for the cuts that we've made?
So I'll make a motion to restore the enrichment teacher to a .8 at Mount Leb, and to add a tech integrator in place of a tech para at Hanover Street School, without increasing the budget as we agreed this evening.
Oh, gosh. I wasn't expecting that. Okay. So you're making a motion to put these positions back in? I thought all the superintendent was
so
asking
to allow
for was the ability for people to brainstorm and see if they can come up with the money to do it.
Well, I think she said she put the positions back in as long as there's no change in the money spent. Right?
to allow the
They'd have to find
administrators.
cuts elsewhere.
I think you were saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And does that also apply to the SAU positions and the buses?
No, that's why I just stated those two.
But could it? Although,
If you amend it.
I did have a question.
I
about
care
that.
most about these two positions.
Oh, okay, well, the motion has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Now we need to have a little bit more discussion. You were going to say something?
Oh, all I was going to say was about the SIS position and all of the paperwork and the DOE stuff. I do think that's that's valid. And I'm not sure what you think about budgeting for that otherwise, other than this increase, just because I know it's super stressful on the AAs at the SAU to be doing all of that kind of work at the moment, so.
I don't have anything discretionary that I can toss out. I would certainly go back and meet with Tim and the team and see if that's something that we could find, but I don't have any low-hanging fruit in the budget that I could just go, I'll do this or that. That's really not what I'm prepared to do. I just want to make sure I'm following the lead of the board and making sure I'm clear about what you're asking me to do.
Do you,
Anyone else want to weigh in? Let's let other people weigh in on the motion. Steve?
I guess I'm concerned that we're sort of drifting down a slippery slope, that, we've made a decision and then we're now picking apart each item saying, well, if you can find money to justify this, to cut and allow this one, then you can do that. Well, why can we not then just do that for every item that we just cut? Which then says we're putting it back in the hands of the administrators to make decisions about their budgets. So I think we either should go one way or the other way, but it seems like we're trying to hybrid, which to me seems confusing.
I mean, I think part of the, I'm sorry, can I say something? I think part of the issue is, this is what Wendy was asking before, is if this is a priority, if it's mission critical, is there something else that isn't mission critical, that isn't a priority, knowing that this is now on the table? Because when you originally create these budgets, right, you don't know what's going to be on the table because you're hoping that you get everything you've asked for. So if you're not, then would that change your priorities? But then that approach was not, nobody really followed up on that approach. So then that's where we are now. So
But also, they could decide that they can't afford it. They could decide that other places in their budget cannot be moved, and then they would get to decide.
Anyone else? I guess my take on it is the board has already decided that we can't afford them. And I would say, come back to the drawing board next year with a better plan and ask for the money again. Okay, so a vote on the on the motion to restore the part-time enrichment person and tech integrator at Mount Leb School, Hanover Street School, provided that the administration can find the money elsewhere in the budget. Is that a fair recap? Okay, let's show of hands, all in favor? 1, 2, 3. Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry, no, it's me. 6-3, the motion fails.
Thanks for the clarity, I appreciate that.
Tim, have you done your?
So the number on the screen shows the beginning number. We came in tonight. We reduced the budget by $367,886. Reduces the general. This is all general fund tax rate estimate to 83 cents, and with all the warrant articles, an estimate of 103. So the number, if you wanted to vote tonight, would be a general fund number of 49,424,870.
and can you scroll down just so we can see the impact on a $300,000?
I was hiding that. No, just 309,223.
So $40. That's a year? $40 a year.
And what's the difference between that and the default budget? Do you know?
Good question. Default is down by over 600,000, isn't it?
$327,950. The number on the warrant, if you approve this tonight, the number on the warrant would be 51 million because it includes food service and grants. This food service fund number is higher than it's been in the past. It's been in the past, just because food costs are going up, the assumption still is that it's self-funding. So those last two funds don't affect the tax rate.
Before we go any further, is there one final request? Is there anyone on the board who wants to revisit any other part of the budget? Okay. Not hearing that, could we have a, Tim, could you give us a motion for someone to read back?
I would like a motion to approve a general fund budget of $49,424,870.
Do I need to make the motion? Do you want me to make the motion?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'd move that we adopt a general fund budget of 49 million. Oop,
Took the number away.
you can't do that. That's not fair.
You see it right here?
No, go ahead.
No, you gotta go back to the yellow one, the summary.
Sheet one. Or summary, yeah.
Yeah. Of $49,424,870. Thank you.
Is there a second? Second by Aaron. Further discussion? The only discussion I could make is that this is a tough time under straitened circumstances, and I think this board has done a credible job of being responsible to the taxpayers. Okay, shall we vote? All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 opposed. 1, 8, 1. The budget is approved. Thank you, everyone. Just get organized here. Tim, do we need to have do we need to go through the default budget, or will we do that in January?
Well, I guess I'll take the opportunity to sort of map out what I think would work. We need to have a budget public hearing by January 17th. So our next board meeting would be great to be the budget public hearing. And at that, so you open the public hearing, you say, here's our budget. And then during the meeting, you could approve the warrant articles, put them on the warrant. You could approve the default. You could do all that stuff then, is my point.
When's the next meeting? Is it 2 weeks from now, the next meeting, you mean?
January 11th?
January, okay.
You have the warrant articles in front of you. Obviously, the number would change. If you didn't, it's very non-controversial. So there's the negotiated agreements, the budget. So the budget has to be the second warrant article, and then negotiated agreements can go in any order you want. It doesn't really matter. So I don't expect there'll be much controversy about that, but you could approve all that and put them on the warrant, do all that at the next board meeting, would be all set, it's what I'm thinking.
Well,
So
if that works, that seems like a reasonable plan. But may I ask another procedural question that you may or may not be in a position to answer? At what point does our district clerk need to be involved in our budget, our warrant articles, and so forth? Because I know that he's hasn't had a whole lot of contact with what's going on in the district, and I don't know what I want to make sure that he's up and running and ready to go.
I've been in communication with him over the last few months. He's aware of the deliberative session, so he needs to be at the deliberative session. And really, the only other obligation in a normal year like this, meaning there's no bond or anything, the other obligation he has to do is he has to post the warrant and stuff. So he will post the warrant around town, and he will certify that he did so and be at the deliberative session. And we've been in communication, he is hard to get a hold of, but we've been in communication about those obligations, and so I will stay hounding on him.
Does he need to liaise with the city clerk?
I'll have to ask April Sanborn, the last clerk, if she had any liaison.
I'm just wondering who runs the voter checklist at the deliberative session, and
The town clerk does
the
that.
town clerk does,
Yeah.
not the district clerk.
Correct. We pay the town for their, the people that are there to check you in and stuff. So,
I mean, it's not really the board's job to,
Right.
because the clerk is separate from the board, but I wouldn't want something to fall through the cracks.
I gotcha.
Okay. Just wanted to bring it up. All right, just a few things remaining. We do have first reads on a few policies. And I have to confess, I'm the note keeper for policy committee, and I fell down on the job, but Kristen, as chair, has her own notes. And no vote is required because these are first reads, but if I can ask her to walk us through each of these policies and take any questions that other board members may have. The policies themselves have been in your packet.
All right, so some of this is, by notes, and some is a little bit by memory, perhaps. Sorry, let me look at the... So we're bringing forward for first reading, policy JLCJA, Emergency Plan for Sports-Related Injuries and Additional Protocols for Athletics Participation, which is a new policy. We don't currently have this particular policy, so that is something that is obviously pertinent and requires the creation of a plan in the event of a sports injury. So my understanding is that the team is working on it. So that's there for first read.
And this is required, right? This is a mandated policy.
Right, by the New Hampshire School Board
Yeah.
Association.
Well, by the state of New Hampshire.
Or by the state of New Hampshire, okay, sorry. The next one is first reading of JJA, which is policy, student activities and organizations. And this is a revised policy. We currently have a policy under that same exact code, JJA, but it's being renamed. So we're adopting the New Hampshire School Board Association revised policy on student activities and organizations. Right, so the current JJA that we have on the books is going to be renamed to JJA-R. And this is also being brought forward, so it's technically a new policy, but it's a revised old policy, and we're renaming it, I believe, to student activities and organizations as well. Is that correct, Dick, that we were changing?
Yeah, I mean, you essentially have it correct. We had JJA, and it was organizing a new club.
Right.
And the feeling was that this revised policy from New Hampshire School Board Association really dealt with more guidelines for student activities and organizations that we didn't actually have. And so the committee voted to accept this revised JJA that the School Board Association sent us, though we didn't want to lose our procedure for organizing a new club. So we retain that as JJA-R. So for us, JJA is new, and JJA-R is the old JJA, which is just renumbered. If that makes sense.
with a new
You can't
name.
have an R without having
go
the.
along.
Yeah, no, I got that. I just have a question on JJA, the one that we are looking at today, revised JJA. The new
Wait,
J,
which
the new
School
JJA.
Board Association,
Yes,
JJA?
yes, the one that is in our packet this minute, JJA.
Right.
The change from what we ever had before, I mean, there's lots of new language, but the third paragraph, third sentence really, any student, organization, or school district sanctioned team, club, or activity must be recommended by the building principal and approved by the board. So this policy is now saying that the board is approving all student clubs, teams, or activities.
That's what we do.
Right, but like if a middle schooler starts a, I don't know, like a coding club, we're approving the club? The board is approving the club?
Any club that gets, that has official funding from the board goes to the board.
But none of these clubs have funding from the board until they've been a club or a co-curricular for activity for 3 years. So we're not approving it because of funding reasons, because no clubs get funding until they have been a club with 5 members, according to this, until they've been a club for at least 5 years. So I'm talking about, like, what this is saying is that we are approving every single club that happens in any part of the school. Are we really prepared
That
to do that?
certainly has been the case at the high school.
Right, but
We've
this is
certainly
not.
done that.
But this is not the high school. This is all the district.
The only parallel I can think of is the bass fishing club.
The what?
The bass fishing club, which contains middle schoolers. I mean,
Well-
that was certain, that had to be, that came to the board several times to be organized as a club.
Right, but right now there is a coding club at Hanover Street School that we have not approved. I mean, and I don't think we should. This is my question. Like, are we saying that if 5 kids get together and create a club, any below 9th grade, right, K-8, that they need to come to us to get it approved?
Well, is that a district sanctioned club or just a club of people hanging out and doing stuff?
No, I mean, right now, we didn't approve the coding club, we have it. This is a good example. It's a Hanover Street School Club, it happens, it's sanctioned by the school, they meet after school, they do a thing, I don't know what they do, but they do a thing, and
You say it's sanctioned by the school, I guess that's my question. How is it sanctioned by the school?
the tech para runs it.
So then they're paid to run it though after school, right?
No, that's a different-
They have different programs.
It's a
I don't
different one.
know,
It's not the-
Maybe we're splitting hairs on what club is, because I know
Well,
that
but
they
it's
do
not-
sometimes of, like, I guess, well, let's go down the road of that Girls on the Run Club or whatever that's called. But did that come before the school board?
It
when
did
they
not.
started it at the 2 schools and then it's run by, I think that one's run by volunteers.
Right, but it hasn't, that's what I'm saying, it hasn't come before us, and this would say that it would need to. So I'm not against it coming before us, I just want us to be clear that that's what we're agreeing to with this new policy. Just because the New Hampshire School Board Association wants to do this, if this isn't our current practice, and it makes practice more complicated for us and for elementary kids, I'm not sure that that's what we want to do.
I guess I'm not sure why the practice would be more complicated for an elementary kid versus a high school or middle schooler, but I also think if it's happening on school grounds and is being sanctioned by the school, it's something that the board should probably be aware of overall of activities that are happening in our schools.
That's my question.
Let's bump that back to the superintendent before the second read and to the building principals. I understand your point, and speaking for myself, I'm not sure it's the worst thing for the board to be aware of what organizations are running in our buildings.
No, I don't think so either. I just want us to make sure that we're,
I wouldn't want it to be an impediment.
right.
Yeah,
Okay.
but that was part of the desire to keep the JJA that we used to have, because it did give the protocols for becoming like an actual club, so. Okay, so, next, we have a revised policy, JLCJ, on concussions and head injuries. We have a current policy, but we're taking over the New Hampshire School Board Association revised policy, which is a little bit more inclusive. We did have a few minor changes. So I'm looking at my old copy from the policy committee. I I didn't look through the new one in the packet, but I assume those small changes have been made. Yeah, it was sort of amusing that we have a revised policy for BEDH, public comment and participation, because that is something we're all very familiar with. We did spend some time going over what we felt was more in line with our best practices at different board meetings about time limits and various things, because the School Board Association suggested lots of different time limits, longer time limits, some optional requirements. So we kind of streamlined their policy a tiny bit to bring it a little bit more in line with what we normally do.
Can I ask a question about that before you? So my understanding was that the legislation now is that you have to have a minimum of 30 minutes, right, of public comment? Like that's why.
That's correct.
Right, so we have it 15, 2 places in this document, even though I think we wanted to change it to 30, and I just want to make sure that's correct. So if we look at number 3, B3, the board will provide a minimum of 15 minutes to hear public comment. So shouldn't that say now 30 minutes?
We discussed that 30 minutes.
Because the next B4 says individual speakers, blah, 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 they can vote to increase or decrease the individual time limit for all speakers, but may not decrease the aggregate time below 30 minutes.
Right. Oh, so your question is?
They don't
should
agree.
have a minimum of 30 minutes?
Yeah.
We did discuss that. I don't know the,
I mean, as they stand right now, those 2 items contradict each other.
right.
And I think I think we got the,
I think the 30 should have been removed.
I think the 30 is what the state's required.
The 30 is the state
Yeah,
requirement.
perhaps.
Mistaken maybe in policy because we actually wanted it to be 15 at both places.
But can we do it, because
But if it's been the new law, then obviously.
isn't that why we got that?
Yeah.
Well, they changed a few, like, random other stuff too, but.
If you recall, the discussion in policy was that it really has little impact on us since it is
Right.
our practice. We go 15 minutes. If there are still people who want to talk, many, many times we have extended and extended and extended. During COVID, we had one public comment period that went for over an hour. So it's not this board's practice to prevent people from commenting before the board.
But the question is the state requiring 30 minutes?
Yes, and that's what the new RSA
Can
says.
we have a policy on the books that contradicts the state requirement?
Yeah,
Well, we can
talk
take
about
it
weapons
back
in the
to-
school.
Sorry?
So we can talk about firearms in the schools.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
it's a.
I mean, I'm okay if we have a policy on the books that contradicts the state, but we need to be consistent in the writing of whatever the policy is that we decide.
Because here it says
'Cause
2 different things.
Well, on page, the last page, it goes back to 15, so C, last paragraph. So we go back and forth between 30 and 15 in this document.
Well, it was supposed to be all edited to be 15 across the document, because
So-
that's what we discussed in policy. So we can easily talk about it in January at our next policy meeting, and, I don't follow the law about that, so Joanne didn't mention it, so.
Dick, is there any value in consulting with our attorney?
We'll probably wind up doing that.
Well, I think all you have to do is
We
go
do have someone
back,
that just comments on policies.
I think all you have to do is go back to the notation of the RSA and look at what the
Yeah.
RSA says.
Yep, we can do that.
So,
Right, there was one other thing which I'll mention, which we had a discussion about, was how much time to allot. And we have historically given 3 minutes a person, equal time. And that was an option of 3, 5, et cetera. So that was not mandated. So we're within our purview to limit it to 3 minutes, which I think we agree is a good amount of time. So, yeah, we can, I don't know how to go into the
so the,
laws.
All you have to do is
It
Google
wouldn't-
RSA.
It wouldn't be unreasonable to send this back to policy and say, make sure it's consistent with RSA 91A2 and A3.
And since it's going back to policy, I have two other
I'm
questions.
sorry, 189.74. Go ahead.
Sorry, two other questions. So on B7, second page, in order to comply with the official minutes requirements of RSA 90, blah, 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 speakers shall identify themselves clearly for the record. Do we want to say here, including name and ward? Because that is what we normally ask people to include.
It's, again, is that, so it seemed to be, when I mean, I wasn't at the policy committee meeting when you discussed these specifically, but when I was reading the versions of, and prepping for that meeting, is that, so is the policy now allowing for people that are not Lebanon citizens to be able to speak at our meeting?
I don't think so. So the board encourages residents to attend board meetings and comment. It says residents.
Can I take the opportunity to ask a question about that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a third of our school, our high school, are people who are from other towns. And again, I'm speaking as a Plainfield citizen, I guess. I'm not saying that they certainly don't have any voting rights. But I've often wondered, like, if I wanted or my wife wanted to say something about their kids' experience at the high school, would they be allowed to? Because we don't live in town, but we do. Plainfield pays 17 grand times 4 times 4. Like, there's a lot of money that Lebanon got from my family, from Plainfield for my family. So I just wonder what you guys think about that. Is there a need to allow area school people to at least say something if they want to?
Absolutely.
I would think so.
Yeah, I would think so too.
They're
And
an
in
invested
fact,
stakeholder.
we have.
Right.
I think the
Perhaps
question
should be-
is a non-resident, maybe we could clarify that somewhere, but a non-resident being someone, you know, who lives in a totally different school district, you know, whatever, Concord. But, yeah.
This needs to go
Be
back.
a resident or
This
have
needs to go back to policy.
I guess anybody who's attached to the area agreement, right? Because even if you don't have a child in the school, you're still paying taxes in Plainfield for kids to come here.
Yeah. So since it's going back, I have one more thing. Feels this is all going to go back to policy, but my last question is B12, vitamins. So this is people can request initiatives or other items to be placed on the board's agenda. So it refers to another board policy, but requests for a matter to be placed on an agenda should be presented in writing to the superintendent no less than 14 days prior to the next board meeting. So that seems like a long time, since we don't usually get these agendas until 3 days before the meeting is happening. It seems like a person in the community who has an issue that they want to bring up. We're basically saying you can bring up this issue if you can get it to her in writing, and then 2 weeks from there, we will talk about your next thing. So it just seems like a particularly long period of time. But
Did
I
you
want
have a suggestion for another?
I mean, I would say like 5 days or a week even, but I wouldn't go longer than that, because it feels like sometimes people are bringing things up that are kind of more immediate, right? And like, for instance, this, when the people came to talk to us, they came as a public comment to talk about this crossing guard situation, right? But if they had contacted, according to this policy, if they had contacted the superintendent, say, I want to put this on the agenda, she would, even though it happened that day, she would have said, according to this, you can't get it on the agenda for 2 weeks, right? So I just want us to think about that a little bit.
I suspect, though, that 2-week requirement is if someone is requesting an item to be put on the agenda that might require homework be done by the business administrators, and they need sufficient time.
It's for the protection of the district.
Right.
I agree.
Whereas if it's something emergency that's brought up, something emergent and it's brought up during public comment, that's how they deal with the
Right, but
critical
it's
time.
just if someone didn't come to public comment, right? Like they called and said, this is really important, I want to do this. I mean, I agree. I think that's true. I just think, do we need 2 weeks to do the research? Can we do it in 5 days? Can we do it in a week?
You have to publish too, your agenda.
Which we,
X number of days before the meeting as well.
it's 3 days, which we do, so.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how the city council does it. It takes forever to get something on the city council agenda. takes a long time.
Anyway, I mean, since it's going back to policy, if you guys want to talk about it some more, it
Well,
seemed.
I'll circle it and
Yep.
you can ask Joanne
So,
what she thinks.
Dick, the RSA 18974 it requires 30 minutes, no less than 30.
I think one of the things that was troubling to us is the notion of having 20 minutes of silence.
Well, if nobody speaks though, can't you,
As long as the
wasn't there
as long
something
as the policy permits that, yeah.
where if there's no public comment, that you can make a motion to, and then if it comes back up, do you have to allot that time?
Well, I mean, you're not seeing the original text of this. The original text of this included provisions, how if people talk for 30 minutes and people still have other things to say, you need to allow a period at the end of the meeting for people to continue talking for an additional period of time. There are things that
Well, there were a lot of optionals.
they rarely come up. But we want to make sure the policy is flexible enough to allow. All right, back to policy.
I think that was the last policy. The others are discussions of donations.
Okay. Okay, so some of these will come back for second read in January. BEDH may come back for another first read, we will see. Probably will. Okay, discussion, acknowledge the $579 donation from Hannaford's Help Schools for Lebanon High School, which the board gratefully acknowledges. Acknowledge $650.50 donation from Jane and Raymond Lemire for Mount Lebanon School lunch balances. We're much appreciative of that. We have already talked about the federal holiday of January 2nd. and
Dick, can I
voted
just
on
ask
that.
a question
Yeah.
of Tim, since he's here, with the food balances, now that we don't participate in the free program, how much of an issue are we having with negative balances again?
Well, just for precise language, we do participate in the free and reduced lunch program. There's just not universal meals. And I don't have, I mean, we're sending out letters and stuff again, but I have no idea. I can find out how we're doing compared to previous years. But I don't know right now.
I think there was, didn't we say last meeting that there was a donation at Hanover Street School as well, an anonymous donation to clear this lunch balances there. So we know that there are balances at both Hanover Street, were balances at both Hanover Street and Mount Leb, but I don't think there was an amount of last time.
Historically, I can tell you, historically, we've run about $3,000 to $4,000 across the district for the year, which, I don't know what you think about that, but that's a really good number. So,
Tim, can you have those numbers, current numbers for next time?
I can. Yeah.
Committee updates, finance and facilities, next meets on December the 15th. Policy met November the 28th, we'll meet again on January 9th. EC
Dick,
yeah.
finance and facilities is tomorrow, right?
Huh?
No, okay, so you said next week, next meeting, sorry.
Next meeting is
I was like,
Thursday,
what?
December 15th.
Not next week?
That's day after today.
Yes. Next meeting is day after today.
It's almost there.
Right.
Yes.
So sorry. It's a long meeting.
Yeah, I know. EC met on Monday the 12th. Is there something to report out from that meeting?
Yeah, we talked about enrichment, like I said. They're still in the rough draft, they're drafting. There's been already changes that have come back to EC. We also went over the handbooks and the programs of study. There were quite a few questions and corrections and comments about handbook and program of studies, all of which they ably answered. And those will be coming, the drafts of those will be coming for approval to the full board soon.
Personnel negotiations has not met. Student Wellness Advisory Committee next meets Wednesday, January 4th. It's 3:15. Next meeting for the Harvard Area Career Technical Center is Tuesday, March 14th at 9 a.m. Area Committee meets the end of February here, 6 p.m. The District City Task Force will meet on January the 27th. We've received invitations for that, but I have not yet seen an agenda. The Track Fundraising Committee will not meet again until January the 19th, and that's primarily to follow up on outstanding grant applications that are out there. Future agenda items, board member recommendations or questions? Anyone wants to get on the agenda?
This is a 2-week.
Right.
Yeah. Speak now. Speak now, or you're going to wait for a month.
I did get a email from a parent, and she did subsequently talk to Joanne. But I just wanted to mention, because I think Joanne was going to say something about it, but she is not here now. The parent asked a question about what is the district policy on if a child wanted to start going by a different name and or a different pronoun, say at the middle school or the high school, what is our policy and procedure on that? And as far as I know, we board-wise do not have a policy on that yet, specifically articulated. And I think the parent got back to me and said that Joanne told her that there were, the procedure usually involved the school counselor and was on a case-by-case basis at this point. So I think it's important that we do think about moving towards having a policy about that, because those things are going to become increasingly more important to have a stance on, and to have a policy so that children and parents know what to expect and know how their rights are being protected or cared for.
I'd be surprised that NHSBA doesn't have some recommended policy.
Oh, that's an interesting story. They have a policy on gender identity issues, which they have withdrawn and no longer made available. Policy committee has that language. We'll be reviewing it at the next meeting with an eye to bringing it to the board for adoption as one of our policies.
Great.
Despite the fact that NHSBA doesn't want to be involved anymore.
So if that addresses this situation, that'd be great. I didn't know the context of that policy.
That goes far. The policy that they're no longer standing behind involves things like use of bathroom and locker facilities, parental notification,
Right.
things of this
Okay,
nature.
good.
All those things that you've been reading about in the news. But presumably the parent has been in contact with the principal to get the
Yeah, so this was
information.
actually not the parent's specific question. She was asking generally, and she has been in contact with the superintendent.
Great.
So
Next school board meeting is Wednesday, January 11th. Why am I looking at January 17th?
So we don't have one on December 28th.
No, I know, but
No, that
Tim,
was my
Tim,
question.
when you were talking
I know.
about budget public hearing, you mentioned January 17th.
that's the deadline, right?
Did I thought I looked at this, so I was speaking. It's got to be by the 17th, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
that's the
it.
deadline.
Okay, yeah, so January 11th is our next meeting.
So we've canceled the one on the 28th of December.
Because of school vacation, I think we don't have one. Is that correct?
Can we agree that this board will not meet on December 28th?
All in favor?
Hearing no objection, we'll do that by consensus. And if it's on the calendar, it will be removed.
No, I really want to meet.
I love you all.
The deliberative session is scheduled for Saturday, February 4th in this building, in the gym. Excuse me. And the last item is an update on the superintendent search. Karen Wolsey has very graciously stayed through a long, long meeting.
I don't feel bad for you.
We have moved that up.
That's okay. It's very quick. Our last meeting was November 22nd. We polished and finalized the application. It was posted on 11/23. The closing date for applications is January 13th. And we're going to meet again on the 19th to start looking at how we are scoring, for lack of a better word, the applications.
Okay.
So we have a rubric to go by based on the application and what the district is looking for. Any
So it's open
questions?
until when?
The 13th of January.
Do you want to tell them how many we have so?
I don't know. Should I do that? I know how many there are. Yeah, we have 5 applications so far. Did
Early
everybody
days.
get 5 other
Early
than
days, Joe.
Richard? Your email wasn't working. You didn't get.
No, I got nothing.
I don't know why.
I
We'll
don't
double
know.
check it. I checked your email. It
I'm
was
always
correct.
the last to know, Karen.
I'll forward them to you again, but your email was
I've had
correct.
issues with the consultant before with emails.
Oh, okay.
I think that my address in her directory may not be correct.
I'll forward them to you right after now.
Thanks.
Yeah, sure.
Any questions for
No more
Karen?
questions? Any more questions? Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Stephen,
I'd like to move that we adjourn.
is there a second? Second, MJ. All in favor?